Now, onto the Third Legion, the Emperor's Children, sometimes referred to after their fall to chaos as the Lords of Proflagracy. They are a notorious traitor legion of Chaos Space Marines, who are entirely devoted to the service of the Chaos God Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. Originally, however, they were the proud and noble Third Legion of the Imperium of Man. The transformation from esteemed warriors to renegades obsessed with excess is often viewed as one of the most tragic falls in the Imperium's history. Uniquely, the Emperor's Children bore the Emperor's own name and icon as their own, the Palatine Aquila, a rare honor bestowed by his hand in order to symbolize the Legion's martial perfection and their meeting of his expectations. Amongst the ancient Space Marine legions, none were seen as more celebrated or had less of a reason to betray the master of mankind than the Emperor's Children, as they epitomized the Emperor's vision for the Legion's Astartes, noble in action and appearance, all the while excelling in all endeavors, strong, civilized, purposeful, and unwaveringly loyal. Despite their exalted status, the Emperor's Children would descend into treachery, becoming one of, if not the singular most vile and depraved creatures to serve chaos in the 40th millennium. Their pride and hedonistic desires now enslave them, leading them to betray the Emperor and humanity which they once served with such great distinction. Today, the Emperor's Children are merely a shattered legion, much like their counterparts, the World Eaters. Their unity was destroyed by their allegiance to chaos, and now they exist as scattered and autonomous warbands of heretic Astartes in the Eye of Terror. These warbands are dedicated to their own pursuits of corrupt and hedonistic pleasures. Chaos Space Marines of the Emperor's Children have become rather infamous for their grotesque mutations and surgical alterations bestowed upon them as gifts by Slaanesh or any of the Emperor's Children's apothecaries. These alterations are designed to enhance their perfection and allow them to feel more, sense more, experience more than ever before. This is a blessing in the eyes of their twisted patron, further entrenching them in the service of their deviant ways. The transformation of the Emperor's Children from paragons of nigh unquestionable virtue to agents of chaos is a grim reminder of the corrupting power of pride. The Emperor's Children now exist solely to push every boundary and every experience, along with every possible sensation, to its utmost. These warriors have been entirely enthralled by Slaanesh, the Dark Prince and the youngest of the Chaos Gods. However, there was a time when the Legion was properly led by the Primarch Fulgrim, in order for all of them to seek out perfection in all that they did, which led them to be regarded as amongst the most dedicated followers of the Emperor, some even seeing them as more loyal and fervent to the cause than the Custodes. Fulgrim, the Emperor's Children's Primarch, gained this need for perfection as he grew up on the bleak and dying world of Chemos. This human mining colony had long since fallen into decay and decline, as Old Night had claimed the nigh endless domains of mankind. Isolated from the surrounding systems, Chemos industry had fallen silent, its mines replaced by reclamation plants and vapor extraction facilities that barely sustained the dwindling population. Within 50 standard years of his arrival on Chemos, Fulgrim had risen up to leadership, driven by a vision to rediscover and rebuild the wonders of long-lost ages. Yet it was only when the Emperor came to Chemos that Fulgrim could fully realize his dreams. By then, Fulgrim's ambition had extended far beyond his homeworld, as he desired to elevate all of humanity to glory yet unseen. When Fulgrim was introduced to the Space Marine Legion that shared his genetic inheritance, his sons, he did not find a resplendent host as many of his brothers did, but a mere 200 battle brothers. It seems that a catastrophic accident had befallen the nascent Third Legion early into their development of its gene seed, significantly hindering its growth and numbers. As a result, Fulgrim's transhumanization human warriors had to be in essence integrated into another legion's ranks until their numbers were sufficiently restored to fight independently under Fulgrim's leadership. And his warriors were assigned, unfortunately in the long run, to the Luna Wolves, the legion of Horus Lupercal. Under Horus's guidance, Fulgrim would master the arts of warfare to an unprecedented degree. This would set the stage for the Emperor's Children's early successes and their eventual tragic downfall. The rise and fall of the Emperor's Children is a tale woven in ambition and in the pursuit of the ever unattainable perfection. They were transformed from paragons of virtue to the most vile and malevolent of all chaos corrupted due to their unchecked pride and hedonism. From the earliest days of its service during the Great Crusade, long before their Primarch was discovered, the nascent 3rd Legion was renowned for its relentless pursuit of perfection in all endeavors. Its dedication, coupled with their extraordinary defense of the Emperor during the Proximan Rebellion, earned them the unique honor of bearing the Emperor's Aquila on their chest. This distinguished mark symbolized their status and their unwavering and unshakable commitment to the Emperor, which led to the early designation of their legion as the Emperor's Children, a title they retained even after the catastrophic events of the Horus Heresy. Some argue that Fulgrim's insatiable desire for perfection ultimately drove him and his legion into the service of Slaanesh. However, the exact details of Fulgrim's fall may still yet be shrouded in mystery, but it is evident that Horus must have actively appealed to Fulgrim's refined sensibilities in order to exacerbate his already disturbing quest for unattainable heights of sensation and perfection. However, his limits would come much later than those of any other mortal, as Fulgrim was gifted with the post-human physique of a Primarch, one which allowed no endeavor to seem beyond reach, despite everyone having their own limits. Every strategy and tactic of war, along with the pursuit of various artistic endeavors, from poetry to sculpture, would become almost natural once Fulgrim set his mind to it. As Fulgrim's soul became increasingly tainted by the influences of Slaanesh even before his attaining of the Laer blade, his passions would grow darker and darker and his desires more extreme. And eventually, acting on Horus's behest, Fulgrim would attempt to persuade his brother Primarch, Ferrus Manus, and his best friend into believing that factions within the nascent Imperium had begun to collaborate and conspire against Fulgrim, Ferrus, and their kin. This would eventually lead to a bitter confrontation of the once closest of brothers. And although Fulgrim survived the encounter, Fulgrim's reward was naught but damnation, setting him firmly on the path that would lead the Emperor's Children to side permanently with the traitorous forces of chaos, beginning at Isstvan V and ultimately leading to the siege of Terra. Even though the Emperor's Children were present during the siege of Terra, they would not partake in the direct assault on the formidable fortifications established by the Praetorian of Terra, Rogol Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists Legion. Unlike the World Eaters and the other traitor legions who relentlessly attacked the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's Children decided to indulge in their own way, wreaking havoc on the surrounding cities and outlying regions of the throne world. In a veritable conflagration of unrestrained cruelty and depravity, they would slaughter untold thousands, millions even, of the Emperor's subjects, just for the thrill of it. There are still whispers that the Emperor's Children used the unprecedented violence of the Siege of Terra to harvest vital fluids from their countless victims, creating an abominable distillation which would function as a stimulant, granting them access to previously unheard heights of sensation. Ultimately, the Siege of Terra ended when the Emperor slew the arch-traitor Horus, forcing whatever remnants of the Emperor's Children remained to retreat from Terra along with the other traitor legions. In their flight, the Emperor's Children would leave behind a trail of desecrated worlds and violated populations, eventually joining the ranks of those traitor legions who sought refuge within the Eye of Terror. Here, they would initiate a new and devastating series of conflicts against their former allies amongst the Chaos forces, in their relentless search for more mortal and demigod slaves to serve their hedonistic desires. The post-Siege of Terra history of the Emperor's Children seems to be largely obscured from many an imperial scholar, which has left one of the greatest mysteries concerning the fate of Fulgrim, who appears to have vanished after having ascended into a demon prince of chaos, though there are whispers that after his apotheosis he eventually started to return to the mortal plane. There are also claims that Fulgrim has potentially retreated and hidden within a demon world of his own, where he continues to rule, overseeing the based extremes of sensation and experiences far beyond mortal comprehension. For those who revere Slaanesh, this mythical place is considered the holiest of holies, with many dedicating their entire lives in obsessive quests to find a place that may or may not exist. Now, onto the origins of the Third Legion. The Third Legion was created alongside its brother Space Marine legions during the later phases of the Unification Wars. Many of its finest warriors were drawn exclusively from the courts and the blood of the princes and royalty from the continent of Europa. The nobles of Europa would go on to select their best youth, their heirs, offering them up to the Emperor of Mankind as both a tribute and penance for the previous defiance, following their systematic defeat by the Imperial Thunder Regiments. Amongst these offerings were the firstborn sons of each noble family, a fact which some imperial scholars believed gave them their legion's enduring name, where the Aquila would be gained later. Some European noble families contributed grudgingly, viewing these young men as little more than hostages, while others would seek to cooperate with the zeal of true converts to the imperial cause. However, the Third Legion's early developments were marked by these dualities of both honor and defiance, tribute and penance, zeal and reluctance. House Locus of Comarag, for example, reportedly sent all of its sons in order to have them transformed into Astartes upon their capitulation to imperial rule, and would continue to give their firstborn of each generation thereafter to the Third Legion willingly in subsequent solar decades. Other Terran dynasties would follow the example set by many of the nobles in Europa, filling the ranks of the Third Legion with the best bred youth on Terra. This would create a martial brotherhood whose ancestry stretched back to the lost ages of human history. In their early conflicts, the Third Legion supported some of the most noble actions of the nascent Imperium, in particular functioning alongside the Imperial Army proper, often directly leading its troops into battle. This approach differed notably from many of the first founding Space Marine legions, which were typically deployed as unified commands en masse, serving as shock troops who were only supported by heavy war machinery. The integration of these noble youths into the Third Legion not only strengthened its ranks, but it infused the legions with a unique blend of aristocratic honor and martial prowess, differentiating their combat techniques from those of the other legions Astartes, creating an identity solely unique and unparalleled within their brother transhumans. Not even the noble Custodes could boast of such genetic lineage, as the Third Legion possessed a profound understanding of the strengths and myriad weaknesses of the diverse armies serving the Emperor, as they drew from Terra's rich military traditions in order to command with authority and purpose. During the Unification Wars, notable campaigns such as the Antarctic Clearance served as a testament to the Third Legion's strategic power, using limited resources to accomplish something that would have left many other legions struggling for much longer. And while history credits Army Group Antilles with the victory, a closer examination will reveal that it was actually the Third Legion that crafted the tactics and directed the campaign to its successful conclusion. Similarly, the Bronze Host conquest of Naridan and the Fifth Rising of Jove Sat II were largely orchestrated by the Third Legion. Despite this honor roll being extensive during the Unification War, they did not bear the Third Legion's names proper. These examples would underscore the Legion's exceptional ability to not only execute military operations to far surpass the Emperor's expectations in warfare. It seems their coordination with what some Astartes viewed as lesser troops came naturally to the former aristocrats of the Third Legion, as they possessed a profound understanding of the human mind and the duties of leadership. Even though it would become a point of derision by other legions, they would continue on with this tradition for long into the Great Crusade. It would only be after the Proximian betrayal during the Great Crusade that the Third Legion would earn a singular distinction that would last throughout the entirety of the Great Crusade: the right to bear the Palatine Aquila. This was the God Emperor's personal standard, and they got to use it within their heraldry. This great honor was one that was not shared between the legions. That was until the tumultuous events that were the Horus Heresy, which prompted this symbol's adoption by all loyalist legions. This honor was not one that was bestowed lightly, but one which was earned through great valor and sacrifice. During the imperial compliance ceremonies of Proxima, one of the Third Legion's most noble of cohorts was serving as the Emperor's honor guard, and they stood fast against an insurrectionist surprise attack. They, alongside the Legio Custodes, fought fiercely against significantly greater numbers, and held their ground in order to protect the wounded Emperor from an ambush involving the devastating and deadly vortex weapons. Their heroic sacrifice allowed the Emperor crucial moments to recover so he could lead a mighty counteroffensive. In recognition for this unwavering loyalty and bravery, the Emperor himself would proclaim that they had the right to the Palatine Aquila as the standard of the Third Legion Astartes. This revered testament to their deeds became a symbol of unique honor amongst those loyal to the Imperium. It also granted them the solemn duty to enact a complete and total exterminatus upon Proxima, ensuring justice for their fallen and sealing their legacy as the first legion to be granted such a sacred emblem directly by the Emperor. Not even the noble First Legion would have such an honor. The Palatine Aquila, with its profound significance representing both the Imperium and humanity, would become the most enduring of emblems for the Third Legion, one which some could argue would push them further and further in their attempts to reach perfection, potentially being part of what led them to their fall to Slaanesh. From then on, in times of peril and utmost danger, the Emperor would entrust members of his newly renamed Emperor's Children with pivotal roles as his personal aquilifers and equerries, roles that would otherwise be served by the Custodes. These Astartes bore the revered Palatine standard as a symbol that marked their equality with the Emperor's personal bodyguard. In battle, they would command newly acquired armies and lead them through the adaptation process, ensuring compliance with the Emperor's will and guaranteeing that they would meet his rigorous standards. The mere presence of these warriors bearing the Emperor's symbol was often enough to maintain the obedience of wavering allies, in particular in recently pacified human worlds. This privileged role elevated the Emperor's Children in distinction as the Emperor's chosen elite. This led to a reputation for faithfully executing orders without deviation, even at the cost of their own lives. This was unparalleled amongst the legions of the begrudging Imperium. However, one catastrophic event that would leave an indelible mark upon the early decades of the Third Legion's existence was the devastating loss of nearly the entirety of the gene stock of the Emperor's Children. This disaster struck within a year of their monumentous triumph fighting along the Emperor on Proxima. As the Emperor's wars for unity would go on, they would suffer a myriad of gene seed blights, constantly decreasing their numbers and decreasing their combat effectiveness during the Great Crusade. With the pacification of the Selenar gene cults of Luna and the Treaty of Mars, the Imperium was now able to produce Space Marines at an unprecedented rate. Consequently, the legions began to expand rapidly to meet the demands of the vast new wars across the stars. During this period, the expansion of the gene seed forges on Luna undertook the implantation of recruits for all Space Marine legions. A portion of the Third's gene seed reserve would be dispatched to Luna for this specific purpose. The events that followed, however, seem to be shrouded in no lesser amount of secrecy, as there are several conflicting accounts regarding the fate of these gene seed supplements. Some sources claim that the remnants of the subdued Celestine cults, still resistant to the Imperium's rule and the Imperial truth, hijacked a defense laser and destroyed the ship carrying a large majority of the 3rd Legion's precious cargo. Other accounts suggest that the ship lost control and crashed while attempting to dock, yet some stories assert that the vessel simply vanished without a trace, never to be found again. This tragedy, whichever version is true, was a major turning point for the 3rd Legion, as it profoundly impeded their ability to regenerate their ranks, leaving a long-lasting shadow over their early history, as not only a logistical setback, but a blow to morale and the future of the Emperor's children, leading to the necessity of implantation techniques that would cause further flaws in the gene seed, leading to less and less Astartes being successfully made with each implantation attempt. However, it would not endanger the survival of the Legion as a whole, if not for a second calamity which occurred in quick succession. Like all legions, the 3rd had created rituals to recover the progenoid gland from their fallen warriors. From these organs, a fresh set of gene seed implants could be grown, allowing for new Astartes to replace the fallen. This system, however, was far from perfect. The nature of battle and the manner upon which the legionaries died did not always allow for such recovery. To ensure a constant supply of organs for new aspirants, a reserve of gene seed of every legion was kept safe on Terra. This emergency reserve should have ensured the 3rd Legion's continued survival and growth regardless of what had happened on Luna, but within a single night, that hope would be obliterated. It was discovered that a fast-acting viral blight had suddenly infected several gene seed vaults on Terra. Its cause unknown. Potentially, it could even be the nascent conflagrations of chaos. However, the janitors of the Mechanicum, tasked with overseeing gene seed stocks, would fight feverishly in order to contain all the blight that threatened to wipe out the entirety of the reserves on Terra in a mere few solar hours, erasing what had taken a near century to build. The infection was undoubtedly artificial due to its targeted infectivity, led many to suspect it was Xenos in origins. Any gene seed infected was rendered functionally useless. While many legions suffered losses from this biological attack, the blight seemed to destroy the entirety of the reserves of the 3rd Legion's gene seed stock. From that moment on, the 3rd Legion began to face an existential crisis. Their ability to regenerate their ranks was drastically and severely compromised, leaving them ever cloaked by the shadow of extinction looming just over them. This catastrophic event not only impacted their immediate future, but also left a lasting scar on their history, as they would question why had they been cursed so cruelly, while other legions swelled in numbers unending, regardless of the setback, such as the 9th Legion, who would constantly be set on missions which they were expected to become extinct, only to come back in greater numbers. It seems that while other legions grew in size and glory during the Great Crusade, gathering momentum, the 3rd Legion would only wither. The only means they had of replenishing their losses was through the use of their progenoid glands, harvested from their fallen. Without their Primarch to serve as a template for rapid replication, the Emperor and his gene rights of the biotechnical division could only rebuild the 3rd Legion's gene seed stocks at painstaking slow rates, meaning that they would likely be extinct if they were not careful within a fortnight of any conflict. As this laborious process unfolded, the 3rd Legion's strength and glory dwindled with each passing battle. It became evident that the Legion would fall far below effective strength, long before their gene seed stocks could be replenished. This was the doom of the Legion, and it seemed inevitable. Yet, just as hope seemed lost, the rediscovery of their Primarch, Fulgrim, transformed their fate, giving them a renewed hope. Known as the Phoenician, Fulgrim's return heralded a new era for the Emperor's children. This monumental event reinvigorated the Legion like no other, providing not only the genetic template they needed, but a charismatic leader to rally behind, to lift their spirits to further perfection. His presence alone inspired a resurgence, turning the tide of their fortunes. The once dwindling 3rd Legion would find new strength and purpose, their legacy forever altered by the return of their Primarch. After being taken from the Emperor of Mankind's gene laboratories beneath the Himalayan mountains of Terra, it seemed that Fulgrim's gestation capsule landed him on the mining world known as Chemos, and Chemos was a bleak and unforgiving planet, warmed by a small binary star cluster and perpetually shrouded in twilight by a thick nebula dust cloud. This desolate world had been settled by humanity during the Dark Age of technology and had become isolated from its neighbors due to the great warp storms which marked the Age of Strife. However, even as they struggled for existence, Chemos' resources were dwindling greatly as its people struggled to produce enough food to meet their basic needs, only surviving due to a network of fortress factories undertaking the Herculean task of sustaining the entire planet's population. The inhabitants of Chemos would work incessantly and endlessly, maintaining the vapor mines and synthesizers, forsaking any form of recreation, art, and or leisure in order to ensure their survival. This was in large part due to the planet's dependence early on during the Dark Age of technology on interstellar commerce for food in particular. As the warp storms made it exceedingly difficult for traders to reach Chemos, it seemed that Chemos would be doomed. Despite their strict food rationing and their efforts to improvise nutrient solutions, and due to this it seemed Chemos was faced with a slow and inevitable decline. Their relentless labor was just not enough to stave off the inevitable shortages and hardships that would be imposed by their isolated existence. However, this would all change with the arrival of Fulgrim on this disparate world, as he would eventually alter it, creating a planet which had no shortage of art and grandeur. Such a task Fulgrim would undertake. Now, to understand how he affected the Legion and how he would be affected by those in the greater galaxy, we must understand Fulgrim's time in Chemos. It all started when scouts from the Fortress Factory of Kallax's planetary police force discovered the Primarch's gestation capsule after it had plummeted to the surface of Chemos. The infant within the capsule was so captivating that the scouts pleaded with the executive leaders of Kallax to spare the life. This was in large part due to how they ordinarily treated orphans, as they were quickly put to death in order to avoid further straining the settlement's resources. However, Fulgrim was spared and entrusted to one of these rescuers, and said individual was a member of the caretakers who would raise him as his own child. And the name Fulgrim would come from an ancient deity of the Chemosian people. Fulgrim soon became a legend in his own right. At half the age when most children began to work in the vapor mines and the synthesizers, Fulgrim would already meet the obligations of an adult laborer. His understanding of Chemosian mining technology was in essence intuitive, allowing him to modify and enhance its efficiency due to an extraordinary inbuilt technical acumen. By the age of 15 Terran years, Fulgrim had ascended from a simple laborer to becoming one of the executives who governed the fortress factory of Kallax. As a leader, Fulgrim grasped the dire plight facing Kallax and other settlements on Chemos. The population and their technology were in a gradual state of decline due to the severe resource shortages they faced. Fulgrim's rise to leadership and his subsequent contributions would mark the beginning of a transformation upon Chemos, and ultimately a transformation for the Third Legion itself once they reconnected with their father. Under Fulgrim's visionary leadership, teams of engineers embarked on ambitious expeditions beyond Kallax and beyond the other fortress factories. Without him, this would be a death knell to all those who exited. But thanks to him and his great leadership, they reclaimed and restored many of Chemos' ancient mining outposts, some of which had produced supplies for the first time in more than solar decades. This allowed for the creation of a surplus, something which had not been known long since prior, and this surplus allowed Chemos to purchase food and other essential materials from what appeared to be interstellar traders, which allowed the planet to finally be lifted from its prolonged state of scarcity. Recognized as a planetary leader, Fulgrim also championed the revival of Chemosian art and culture, seeing it as a vital element of human life that had been long forsaken due to the planet's relentless resource shortages and grueling labor demands. This cultural renaissance was a rather significant turning point for Chemos, as it began to thrive under Fulgrim's guidance. Here would begin the tradition of Fulgrim marrying mortal women, but due to his exceedingly long lifespan, he would suffer as he saw them slowly fade away due to the imperfections of humanity, leading him to further try to perfect all aspects of humanity to an obsessive degree. At first, it would be remarked that he did in fact love some of them, but as time would go on, he would become numbed to their presences, the constant deaths, the constant loss. To many, this marked Fulgrim as indeed eternally bound by suffering, derived from human imperfection. Not long after the monumental achievement of Chemos' renaissance, its isolation would come to an abrupt end, as descending from the perpetually twilight sky, a formation of Stormbird dropships would appear, their heavily armored, battle-scarred hulls emblazoned with the Palatine Aquila, the personal insignia of the Emperor of Mankind, and the insignia of the Emperor's children. This sight of the Aquila seemed to stir long-buried memories within Fulgrim. Though Chemos lacked a former military, the caretakers had formed a planetary police of sorts, a force which would function dual roles as police and protectors of the fortress cities from any and all raiders. It seemed that these men had seen the Stormbird's landing as a potential threat, so they quickly surrounded them and prepared to fire upon them. However, Fulgrim would quickly command the caretakers to welcome their visitors and escort them to Kallax for an audience with him. In his private quarters, Fulgrim encountered what appeared to be heavily armored warriors from the stars. These were the Astartes, and they represented a true civilization which embodied the culture and refinement that he aspired to restore in Chemos. Emerging from their ranks was a resplendent figure, the radiant Emperor of Mankind. Upon seeing the Emperor, Fulgrim was overwhelmed by recognition and reverence, as he silently knelt before his father and offered his sword in his service. From that moment on, Fulgrim would vow to dedicate himself entirely to the Emperor of Mankind and his Imperium. From here, the Emperor would enlighten his son about Terra and the Great Crusade and the grand army that he would lead. His endeavor was one that resonated deeply within Fulgrim, as the Emperor told him that he desired to reunite the fragmented worlds of humanity under a single rule, and that it was this unity which was crucial to prevent humanity's potential extinction at the hands of the galaxy's numerous threats, and to establish humanity as the preeminent intelligent species within the Milky Way. Seeing the state of the planet that he had originally landed on, Fulgrim's beliefs and ideologies greatly resonated with this. While imperial records do not specify an exact date for this pivotal meeting, they do note that Fulgrim's flagship, the Pride of the Emperor, was completed by the Mechanicum of Mars 160 years before the onset of the Horus Heresy in the early 31st millennium. It would be then that Fulgrim would return to Terra with the Emperor in order to meet with the Third Legion, those sons crafted from his own genome. To his horror, he learned that a series of calamities had nearly annihilated the entirety of the Legion, leaving the majority of their gene siege stock cultivated from his DNA in rather severe straits. The combination of the initial accident, the subsequent viral blight, and the Emperor's children's dogmatic following of the Emperor's orders had greatly cost the Legion. Without the access to their Primarch, replenishing their gene siege stocks had been an arduous and slow process. However, before Fulgrim on Terra stood 200 transhuman warriors, which represented the entirety of the Third Legion's remaining strength. These Astartes bore banners of companies which had now been reduced to mere handfuls or entirely perished. Despite the reduced numbers, they stood unbowed, unbroken, and proud, embodying a defiance of fate that perhaps mirrored Fulgrim's own struggles on Chemos. In a solemn address, Fulgrim entrusted them with a sacred mission to bring the Emperor's wisdom to these stars, stating, "You are the Emperor's chosen, his heralds, his warriors, his children, for this is only the beginning." The Emperor would then be so moved by Fulgrim's words and the steadfastness of the Legion that he formally declared that the Emperor's children would be the designation designation known for this legion, which no other could show any form of reprisal to. From here, the Officio Militaris colleges of arms recorded a monumental change, as the 3rd Legion's colors would be changed to imperial purple and an eagle's talon spur would be their emblem, along with the imperial aquila. They would be granted a unique right, serving at the emperor's behest alongside their Primarch. Fulgrim was soon consumed by the imperative that he and the emperor's children had to live up to the extraordinary honors bestowed upon them by the emperor, as they aimed to become shining paragons of perfection who were meant to inherit and embody the emperor's personhood and his vision for imperial culture and civilization as a whole. This drive for perfection permeated every singular aspect of the Primarch and his legion from then on, from their military tactics to their embrace of an unusually artistic legion culture, one which could only really be matched by that of the later Blood Angels and the Salamanders in varying ways. But while the others' artistic talents would come from necessity and or an inherent trait, the Emperor's children would strive for this artistic perfection, not due to any traits or inherent desires or even love for the art, but rather for the need to be perfect in every way, including said art. This was to the point that they would develop an concern for aesthetics and personal appearances, which was unparalleled amongst the Astartes, even at points rivaling the vanity of later imperial nobility. Fulgrim himself would epitomize the pursuit for physical beauty. His long silver hair flowed down his back, his wide eyes and melodic voice would welcome all those who sought his counsel, and his full lips often curved in a wary, inviting smile. His power armor was that of the finest quality, fabricated by imperial technology, and it would be intrinsically decorated in the purple and gold colors he had chosen for his legion. Over this, he would often wear a variety of intricately embroidered, high-collared cloaks. However, something that would gnaw at him from his core would be that while he was practiced and poised physical perfection, one of his brothers would rival his aesthetic perfection almost naturally. This would be the great angel himself, Sanguinius. And while he was often considered one of the most charismatic Primarchs, he would seem to never be able to outdo Horus Lupercal in this field. This led to the Emperor's children being a unique blend of warrior artists. This was largely driven by their Primarch's vision for the embodiment of the pinnacle of humanity. They would be exemplars amongst exemplars, the greatest of the great. Fulgrim was eager to begin his conquests of the unknown regions of the galaxy as part of the Great Crusade. However, he would quickly realize that his 200 warriors were far too few to undertake such ambitious endeavors alone. Recognizing the necessity of nurturing the Emperor's children's recovery, the Emperor asked the Primarch Horus Lupercal to mentor his brother Fulgrim and his legion. Over a solar decade, the Emperor's children and the Luna Wolves would fight side by side, forming a bond of brotherhood forged in trust and tempered by battle. Despite their differences, Horus and Fulgrim created an unbreakable bond. The two legions grew incredibly close, as they complemented each other in many ways. While Horus was swift and intuitive, Fulgrim was patient and considered. While the Luna Wolves were direct and brutal, the Emperor's children were flexible and subtle. When the Emperor's children eventually stood on their own, they had become oath brothers with the Luna Wolves, a bond that treachery would one day twist into a chain which would shackle their souls eternally. Over the course of several decades, the Emperor's children's ranks swelled with new Astartes recruited from both Terra and Chemos. This was where the Legion had established its fortress monastery, in particular in the old factory fortress of Calax, and due to this, they had grown at a significant rate, marking an expansion amongst their ranks, allowing them to fully participate in the Emperor's vision for the Great Crusade. Through their shared experiences and with the guiding hand of Horus, the Emperor's children evolved from a formidable force embodying the ideals of perfection and excellence to one which actively was the ideal of perfection and excellence that Fulgrim so passionately pursued. When the Emperor's children reached an appropriate size, Fulgrim would assume command of the 28th Expeditionary Fleet of the Great Crusade, embarking on a campaign that reclaimed numerous human-settled worlds for the Imperium, and amongst these conquests, they would unfold unfortunately run into an advanced Xenos world where Fulgrim's destiny would take a fatal turn. Here we must deviate from the timeline to note the importance of the bond between Primarch Fulgrim, known as a Phoenician, and his brother Ferrus Manus, known as the Gorgon. This was a connection that was profound and renowned throughout the Imperium during the Great Crusade, only really rivaled by the connection between Horus and Sanguinius. Their profound connection was forged during their first meeting beneath Mount Nordia on Terra, in particular in the principal forges of Ulrus. Here, Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, had been demonstrating his extraordinary skills alongside the Forge Masters who had once served the Terrawat clan during the Unification Wars. Upon Fulgrim's arrival, and as he and his elite Phoenix Guard descended upon the Forge complex, a palpable tension seemed to fill the air. Despite never having met, both Primarchs immediately recognized the shared bond of gene alchemy and science that had defined their creation. They would become brothers almost closer than any others, true kin, and it seemed that their presence together was so imposing that the artisans surrounding them were gripped by fear that would come from the potential conflict that could arise between the demigods, as they would follow to prostrate themselves in order to gain some modicum of safety. Reflecting on this encounter, Ferrus Manus recounted to Astartes of the 10th Legion that Fulgrim had declared his intent to forge the most perfect weapon that had ever been created, one that he would wield in the forthcoming Great Crusade. This declaration marked a pivotal moment in the unfolding saga of not just the Emperor's children and their Primarch, but of the Iron Hands Legion and the Imperium as a whole. The rivalry between Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus would be a rather great one, but not one of enmity, rather one of mutual respect and friendly competition. Where Fulgrim boasted of forging the most perfect weapon ever created, Ferrus Manus, famed for his living metal hands, jovially scoffed at the idea of anything crafted by Fulgrim's pasty hands rivaling any of his creations. Undeterred by the jest, Fulgrim accepted this challenge with both dignity and grace, as the two Primarchs stripped to their waists and embarked on a marathon of craftsmanship within the echoing confines of the Mountain Forge. For 3 intense solar months, the forges resounded with the relentless clanging of hammers and the hiss of cooling metal. All the while, the brothers would banter as the two demigods vied to outdo each other in every regard. At the culmination of their labor, each presented their masterpiece. Fulgrim presented the unrivaled Forgebreaker, an exquisite warhammer capable of cleaving mountains in a single blow. Meanwhile, Ferrus Manus revealed the Fireblade, a golden-bladed sword which was perpetually aflame with the forge's essence. Both weapons surpassed any other previously wrought by human hands, and in a rare moment of humanity, each Primarch declared the other's creation superior. Fulgrim likened the Fireblade to the legendary sword of Nuada Silverhand, while Ferrus proclaimed Forgebreaker worthy of the thunder god of Nordic lore. Without hesitation, each exchanged weapons, cementing their eternal bond of friendship through their shared craftsmanship. And indeed, Forgebreaker was a marvel to behold. Its weight would be unmanageable, save for the Emperor's Astartes, but to a Primarch, it would be swung like a mere toy, weightless even. Its ebony haft was adorned with threads of gold and silver, forming a beautiful and intricately crafted lightning bolt, as the hammer's head culminated in the shape of a majestic eagle, its beak poised to strike and its wings outstretched in formidable glory. Those who gazed upon it sensed its profound excellence and the very Primarch-like essence infused within the weapon. It was truly a testament not just of skill, but of love, honor, and loyalty, which should have ensured the bond between the two brothers. After having forged the great hammer given to Ferrus Manus, the Emperor's children's Primarch, Fulgrim, would continue to grow a closer and closer bond with his brother, to the point that legends have it that Ferrus Manus earned his legendary moniker, the Gorgon, a title that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations, drawing parallels to an ancient creature from myth and legend, not from a great action or a legendary battle, but as a joke by his beloved brother Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's children. As the tale goes, Ferrus Manus's epitaph dates back to their first meeting on Terra. And unlike Fulgrim, who reveled in art, architecture, culture, and music, Ferrus was driven by the singular purpose of conquest and lacked interest in little else, seeing these luxuries as wastes of time. This divergence would become even more apparent when the Great Angel, the Primarch Sanguinius, Lord of the Blood Angels Legion, arrived at the Imperial Palace bearing gifts of exquisite beauty and craftsmanship from Baal. Statues carved from glowing rock, rare gemstones, and artifacts of agrogranite, opal, and tourmaline. Fulgrim would quickly be enchanted by these great treasures, seeing the gifts as things to be delighted in and having a new avenue of kinship with a brother, one who also admired the beauty that could be created by mankind. On the other hand, Ferrus Manus would dismiss these displays as frivolous distractions, insisting that their true and only purpose lay in reclaiming the galaxy for the God Emperor. In response to this, Fulgrim would playfully jest and call him a terrible Gorgon, implying that without an appreciation for beauty, they risked missing the grandeur of the stars they sought to reclaim for their father. From that moment on, the nickname would supposedly stick, as Ferrus Manus would not even rebuff the title given to him by such a close brother. This incident would not just show the contrast in personalities, that would go so far as to even be represented amongst these two Primarchs' legions, but it also foreshadowed a diverging path that would eventually lead two of the closest men in the galaxy down a dark and tragic road. Eventually, a fervent zeal would be ignited within the ranks of the Emperor's children once Fulgrim assumed full command of his legion proper, as they would kneel humbly before their leader. And it seems that as though past glories held little sway over their aspirations, their focus would now be singularly fixated on the future, much to their own detriment. A future where failure and any imperfection was inconceivable. Their pursuit for excellence in warfare would become their paramount obsession, demanding less than nothing from perfection at every turn. Whenever another legion would demonstrate any superior prowess in even the smallest and most obscure aspect of warfare, the Emperor's children would take it upon themselves to learn those skills, and attempted to match some of the most specialized warriors in the legions of Astartes. They immersed themselves completely in training and study, allowing these pursuits to consume their very beings until mastery was attained. Once mastery was achieved, they would go on to meticulously evaluate and refine their methods, attempting to perfect their new craft. For the Emperor's children, accomplishments were not victories, if only measured by themselves. An accomplishment would only matter when compared to another. When rival legions received any singular honor, it served both as motivation to surpass them and as a blow to their personal pride, as the legionaries saw themselves as falling short and failing. Such comparisons would often breed jealousy, especially when they lagged behind, and they would hold no end of contempt whenever they surpassed any of their peers. Yet, no matter their successes, the insatiable, gluttonous thirst for perfection remained unquenched. As each day would pass, the achievements of yesterday would hold no value. Each new conquest or refinement was but a mere stepping stone towards a new, unattainable ideal. This would be a foreshadowing to the dark path that would overtake the Third Legion, culminating in atrocities that would validate their obsessive quest for perfection. The precise moment when Fulgrim and the Emperor's children would truly succumb to darkness remains elusive. However, some within Imperial ranks point to Fulgrim's purging of the Xenos species known as a Laer, as the pivotal event that would mark their true descent. It is suggested that this incident would become the catalyst that allowed the youngest of the Chaos Gods to ensnare Fulgrim and to initiate the rapid and uncontrolled corruption of his legion, as the historical records would indicate that it would be on a planet officially catalogued as 28-3, the third world brought into compliance by the 28th expedition where the serpent-like species known as a Laer, who were already fully corrupted followers of Slaanesh, the god of excess and pleasure, would reside on. Laer, the planet's proper name, was an ocean world abundant in vital resources that were deemed as necessary and crucial for the Emperor's Great Crusade. However, even though the Imperium attempted to negotiate with them, going so far as to potentially classify them as a client species, not unlike some of the ones that had been allowed to continue to exist to this day within the Imperium's domains, it seems the Laer inhabitants were rather disdainful of humanity's manifest destiny amongst the stars, and would go on to reject diplomacy with violent reprisals, and the Emperor's children took this personally. In response to this, they met aggression with unbridled force, escalating the tensions into an inevitable conflict that would lead to much bloodshed and the extinction of a species, one that would set in motion the downfall of the Third Legion, as within the planet, it seems the allure of power and the whispers of chaos were ever present, and began to influence the Legion as a whole. During the campaign on Laer, another incident that would forever shake the Legion occurred. Chief Apothecary Fabius Bile of the Third Legion made a startling discovery. While examining the corpses of the Laer, he found evidence of extensive genetic engineering amongst the serpentine-like species, with different castes each being tailored through genetic manipulation in order to fulfill specific roles in Laer society. This would be so surprising that he would go on to present his findings to Fulgrim. This was due to Fabius drawing parallels between the Laer's pursuit for biological perfection and the Emperor's children's own quest for excellence. Fabius boldly proposed that while the Emperor's creation of the Astartes was indeed remarkable, it might represent just the beginning of a greater evolutionary path for humanity. He would continue to suggest that by studying and refining their own genetic material, they could surpass their current states and achieve new heights of perfection. Though his frankness could have been perceived as heresy, Fabius was able to argue that the potential benefits would outweigh the risks by a wide margin. In response to this, Fulgrim would consider the apothecary's audacious suggestions, thinking to himself, could they indeed improve upon their own gene seed, that which created the Astartes and made them so formidable? Could the Emperor's creation be improved upon? He believed that striving for perfection was imperative in order to avoid failing the Emperor, so he was easily convinced by Fabius's convictions, leading to Fulgrim granting the apothecary unrestricted authority to pursue his ambitious endeavors. This singular action would be one that the galaxy would regret millennia after its occurrence. During the entirety of the Laer campaign and afterwards, Apothecary Fabius Bile started making discovery after discovery. Said discoveries would lead to many of the gene-forged creations that Chaos now wields. And eventually, Fulgrim's 28th Expeditionary Fleet would triumphantly claim the entirety of Laer, wiping out the species, and once the planet was subjugated within its vast oceans, the planet's native reptilian inhabitants had adapted through genetic engineering in order to create beings that could survive solely on the floating coral islands, along with another discovery that seemed to put them on a similar technological level to that of the Imperium. Some of the most advanced anti-gravity generators that the Legion had ever seen were possessed by this same race and used to sustain their vast floating coral islands above sea level. There were even some technological aspects that far outstripped the Imperium, but unbeknownst to Fulgrim and his Emperor's children, the civilization had gained many of these boons in part due to having already fallen prey of the chaos god Slaanesh, the god of pain and pleasure, excess, and the numbness that would follow said excess. At the heart of this civilization was a centralized nexus, and within said centralized nexus lay a malevolent artifact of chaos, a single-edged demon blade housing a greater demon of Slaanesh. As it seems, through this was that the influence of Slaanesh had permeated throughout the entirety of the species, and it was in part evident due to the Laer's insatiable cravings for intense sensory experiences, including vibrant colors that had been heretofore unseen and cacophonous sounds, and the perverse enjoyment they had derived from these extreme sensations would greatly mirror the indulgent self-destruction in which soon the Emperor's children would follow. Oblivious to the perilous realities that surrounded him and his sons, Fulgrim ordered his legion and the allied forces of the 28th Expeditionary Fleet to swiftly take the planet and claim it for Terra as soon as possible, and he would succeed. And it was during the eradication of this species and the conquest of the planet proper that Fulgrim and a Astartes contingent would stumble upon the temple dedicated to Slaanesh, on top of which was the Laer blade, whose power was wielded by the fanatical final contingent of defenders of the Laer species. Once they had been cleared out, Fulgrim would discover a mysterious artifact, a circular block of veined black stone, encasing a tall silver sword with a gently curved blade and an incredibly ornate gemstone in its pommel. This blade bore not only the greater demon of Slaanesh, but it was one of such perfection that Fulgrim could physically not help himself. It would be against his very nature to allow such perfection to lie, unheeded to and unattended to, as he was ensnared by its whispers, which would subtly corrupt his thoughts and his very soul towards the service of Slaanesh. Gradually, this blade would become more and more favored, causing him to all but leave his cherished fire blade behind, the gift that had connected him to Ferrus Manus, his brother. Though initially, Fulgrim would dismiss the whispers as a reflection of his own strained psyche, Fulgrim would eventually realize that he had been unwittingly seduced by its promises of power. And the way that he would eventually discover this and the corruption of the blade itself was after persistent entries from his corrupted brother Horus, who himself was being influenced by the ruinous powers following his injury on Davin's moon. Fulgrim would also fall to chaos in short order, as he found his allegiance falling in line with that of the Prince of Pleasure, who promised Fulgrim and his Astartes the path to ultimate perfection, unfettered by the limits and restraints of morality, and allowing them to endlessly indulge in self-obsession. Following the conclusion of the conflicts on Laer, casualties in all the Third Legion's campaigns would significantly lessen, allowing Chief Apothecary Fabius more time to dedicate directly to his clandestine research, and almost guaranteeing complete secrecy for his experiments, as he would relocate himself and his research facility in its entirety aboard the Ardranus, a strike cruiser under the command of Lord Commander Eidolon. Though initially basic, the facility would be expanded upon with Eidolon's endorsement via amassing a diverse and nearly unending array of specialized equipment. However, even though he allowed this, and he even aided Fabius, Eidolon would take keen interest in the work itself, as Fulgrim had briefed him on the ambitious mission which was taken upon by the Chief Apothecary, and eventually Eidolon would volunteer the first subject for full augmentation upon his return from his arduous duties, hoping to be able to enhance his speed and lethality under Bile's genetic manipulations, as he aspired to become Fulgrim's indispensable lieutenant, his true right hand, surpassing all previous Emperor's children. It was during this period where the aspects of corruption would become more and more evident within the Emperor's children. Self-obsession grew rampant. Modifications became the standard. The drive for perfection became all-consuming. Then, during the later stages of the Great Crusade, the Iron Hands Legion would encounter the Diasprex, a nomadic civilization comprising of humans and Xenos, living aboard floating fleet vessels, and once the Iron Hands had shared the imperial truth of mankind, they would go on to extend an offer to the humans within the Diasprex so they may join the Imperium, and seeing as essentially half their culture was told to shove off, they staunchly declined, and in response to this rejection, the Iron Hands, driven by their uncompromising nature, initiated a campaign to eradicate this confederation of malcontents. However, the nomadic fleet proved to be too adept at naval warfare to singularly eliminate, skillfully evading the decisive engagements which Ferrus Manus needed in order to win. All the while, the nomads were able to deal significant damage upon the Iron Hands' strike cruiser, Ferrum, over several months. Facing mounting challenges, Ferrus Manus sought the aid of the Emperor's children, in particular those of the 28th Expeditionary Fleet, those under the direct command of his brother. Together they would form a formidable joint Imperial strike force, aimed at the relentless Diasprex, who, despite knowing full well that they were being hunted by a powerful Imperium fleet bent on their eradication, refused to abandon their sector of space, which was fortified by hidden solar collection arrays, which were crucial for fueling their ships. Upon uncovering these vital energy sources, the Imperium's forces decided to target them in order to provoke an open conflict, one which they would have the advantage in. And it seems that this desperate engagement marked another crucial turning point, as the Human-Xenos alliance fought to preserve their existence with a tenacity that the Space Marines had not expected. During the tumultuous naval battle, Fulgrim's personal gunship, Firebird, would come under severe fire and found itself in dire straits. Responding swiftly to his brother's distress, Ferrus Manus' flagship battle barge, Fist of Iron, rushed to aid his favorite brother in his hour of need. In a daring display of both camaraderie and skill, Ferrus would personally lead a decisive boarding action alongside the Emperor's children, unleashing a torrent of unstoppable devastation upon the Diasprex troops aboard their vessel. However, amidst the chaos of battle, and despite having the fresher troops' greater numbers, victory slipped from Fulgrim's grasp when one of his commanders would seize control of the enemy ship's bridge, rather than himself. This unexpected turn of events left Fulgrim embittered towards Ferrus Manus because it was due to his actions that he had been delayed, and that it was his son, not Fulgrim, who claimed the bridge of the ship, unable to grasp that Ferrus's intent was selfless, due to his worry that his brother may be in danger, rather than any form of pride. It seems that Fulgrim only saw this as an unnecessary loss of both face for himself and lives for his legion. This was in no small part influenced by the insidious demon within the Laer blade, twisting his thoughts, as Fulgrim interpreted Ferrus's actions through a lens of personal ambition rather than brotherly sacrifice and affection. What Fulgrim had perceived as Ferrus's critical remarks and jests aimed at deflating the Phoenician's own ego were in truth gestures in order to preserve humility and present an olive branch of camaraderie and brotherhood. And as chaos had already tightened its grip on Fulgrim, transforming his noble ambitions into self-serving desires, he would fail to recognize the genuine camaraderie and brotherly love that had defined Ferrus Manus' actions on that day. Eventually, Malcador the Sigillite would even comment on the tragedy of the fall of the Emperor's children, as he so eloquently observed that their tragic flaw lay not in their fall from grace, but the unattainable quest for perfection, and the inherent flaws that lay within this quest. Blind to the imperfections that they would create within themselves as they seek to perfect and reach an unattainable ideal, they would descend into the ruinous grasp of chaos, leaving behind only a legacy of flawed magnificence, tarnished by their ultimate betrayal. Members of the Inquisition delving into fragmentary imperial records would go on to posit that the demon-influenced Laer blade, wielded by Fulgrim, began to impose greater and greater effects on his very soul, which extended not only to the Primarch, but also the Emperor's children under his command would be forced to face the full corrupting embrace of the chaos-tainted blade, despite not being in their possession. Amidst those Primarchs grappling with corruption, Fulgrim would find himself unwittingly drawn to the tragedy of the Horus Heresy, in particular during an encounter with Eldrad Ulthwain, a venerable Eldar Farseer from craft-world Ulthwé on the maiden world of Tarsus. Eldrad had sought to warn Fulgrim about Horus's dire predicament, as he had been wounded by the Kinbrach anatheme, which was wielded by Eugene Temba, the planetary governor of Davin, who had been already in the influence of the plague god Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and pestilence. Horus's injury had provided an opening for the chaos gods to ensnare the War Master's very soul, in a similar way to that which was being unknowingly done to Fulgrim. However, Fulgrim's close bond with Horus, due to the years that he had served alongside him when his legion was attempting to recover, led to cries of denial and anger, which were further stroked by the insidious whispers of the Demon Blade, which urged Fulgrim to reject the Eldari's warnings. Driven by rage and the corrupting influence of the Blade, Fulgrim launched himself in a full frontal assault upon Eldrad and his retinue, all the while being supported by a loyal cadre of Emperor's Children's captains and his elite Phoenix Guard. In the ensuing skirmish, the Emperor's Children claimed the lives of revered Eldari figures such as Wraithlord Karen Goldhem, and an avatar of Cain was strangled to death by the Primarch, along with Eldrad and his forces being dealt a devastating blow as they would be forced to withdraw, sorrowfully acknowledging that chaos had already irreversibly ensnared yet another of the Mon Kai's Primarchs. And it would seem that the Eldar's words left a bitter mark on Fulgrim's psyche, which was exacerbated by the insidious influence of his Demon Blade. In response to what he had perceived as treachery, and swayed by his growing darkness, Fulgrim would command the 28th Expeditionary Fleet to deploy devastating virus bombs on several exquisite Eldar maiden worlds, in a ruthless act that was in essence illogical, and driven almost completely due to the paranoia that the Blade had been instilling in Fulgrim. Shortly thereafter, Fulgrim would attempt to confront Horus in person, seeking an explanation to the accusations laid by the Eldar regarding Horus's allegiance to chaos. However, as Fulgrim had taken some precautions after witnessing the Eldar's warnings, he had actually been going with Fireblade to meet Horus. Unfortunately, one of his sons had seen this as a potential mistake by his father, and chosen nobly to bring him his apparent favorite sword. Once he was again in the influence of the Blade, he would not be able to let go. And it was due to this that when he confronted Horus in person, seeking the explanation, Chaos, along with Horus's immense charisma, deftly convinced Fulgrim of the righteousness that embracing chaos was, as loyalty to the Chaos Gods was the only path that Fulgrim truly had to perfection. And it was here that Fulgrim's loyalty was shattered, as he no longer sought perfection in order to complete the Emperor's grand design, but rather in a fervent belief that chaos was the only thing that would allow humanity to gain the perfection he so desired. Under the sway of his newfound convictions, Fulgrim came to view the Emperor and his imperial truth as impediments to humanity's ascension to its full potential. Strangely enough, he embraced chaos wholeheartedly in one swift move as the key to unlocking humanity's ultimate destiny. And as a token of trust and brotherhood, Horus bestowed upon Fulgrim the same blade, the Kinbrach anatheme, which had been infused with the deadly corrupting essence of Nurgle, which had nearly claimed the War Master's life on the moon of Davin. And this would be a testament to the malevolent alliance formed between Horus, Fulgrim, and the ruinous powers of chaos. In obedience to Horus's directive, Fulgrim would go on to face Ferrus Manus aboard the battle barge Fist of Iron in an attempt to sway his closest and dearest brother to join the nascent rebellion against the Emperor. And while the bulk of his forces marched to rendezvous with Horus and the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet on Isstvan, Fulgrim, accompanied by a small contingent aided by the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet, of the Iron Hands would go on to reclaim Caldeus IV from the Orcs, who had recently invaded and taken it. It seems that Fulgrim had harbored a deep hope that amidst the camaraderie and his bond with Ferrus Manus, he would be able to prevail despite their ideological differences and bring Ferrus into the fold. However, the encounter upon Ferrus's sanctum within the flagship led tensions to escalate swiftly into violence, as Ferrus, wielding his silvery necrodermis hands, clashed with Fulgrim, shattering the gift that he had given him, Fireblade, in a ferocious exchange. But unfortunately, the explosive aftermath led to Ferrus being unconscious and teetering on the brink of death. Driven by the insidious whispers of the Demon Blade, Fulgrim sought to end his brother's opposition with Forgebreaker, the formidable warhammer that had been gifted to him by Fulgrim. Yet in a moment where the true Fulgrim shone, the Primarch faltered, and he would be unable to strike down his oldest brother and friend. Despite the demon's relentless urgings and desperate pleas, Fulgrim would then emerge from Ferrus's inner sanctum as he signaled his Phoenix Guard, who had ruthlessly executed Ferrus Manus's loyal Morlock Terminators and severed the Iron Hands Primarch from his last line of defense, to follow him. And even though this was a rather tragic encounter, it must be noted that it indeed showed that some of the original Fulgrim was still there, fighting to be freed from the Demon Blade's influence. And during the aftermath of the tumultuous confrontation aboard the Fist of Iron, the Emperor's children, under Fulgrim's increasingly corrupt leadership, would go on to nearly claim the life of the Iron Hands' first captain, Gabriel Santor. However, the tides would be turned, as in a daring escape, Fulgrim fled aboard his personal assault craft, the Firebird, all the while orchestrating a surprise assault from his personal flagship, the battle barge Pride of the Emperor, and its escort vessels. This sudden and full-out betrayal would go on to cripple the Iron Hands' 52nd Expeditionary Fleet, allowing the 3rd Legion to slip into the warp, bound for the Isstvan system, where Horus and the traitor legions awaited. With their allegiance against the Emperor fully sealed, the insidious corruption of chaos spread like a contagion, a disease, throughout the Emperor's children. Beginning with Fulgrim, the corruption seeped into its highest echelons, leaving almost no one untouched within the Legion, ensnaring Lord Commanders and descending through their ranks, from company captains to squad sergeants. All but a minority, a scant few handfuls, of Emperor's children's Astartes would succumb to the allure of Slaanesh, forsaking their loyalty to the Emperor in the pursuit of perfect hedonism and unrestrained sensual indulgence. Thus, the once noble quest for excellence and perfection of the 3rd Legion had become perverted into a dark desire for self-gratification and excess, marking a tragic and irreversible shift towards chaos that would forever alter the course of some of the finest warriors of the Imperium and seal the fate of many through the Horus Heresy. After overseeing the compliance action on the world-designated 28-4, Lord Commander Eidolon of the Emperor's Children had undergone elective augmentative surgeries performed by Chief Apothecary Fabius Bile. This procedure involved the implantation of a modified tracheal device that was integrated with Eidolon's vocal cords, enabling him to emit a paralyzing shriek akin to the war cries that made the Laer so deadly to the Legion and their mortal counterparts. Initially outraged by the notion of Xenos technology being what would be used in his body, Eidolon vehemently opposed Fabius's surgical interventions. Despite his protests, Fabius would persist, citing the full and unlimited authorization from Primarch Fulgrim himself and Eidolon's prior consent to the enhancements. Eidolon would later demonstrate the efficiency of his new implant during a critical engagement on Isstvan Extremis, the outermost planet of the Isstvan system, leading his first company alongside the Death Guard battle captain Nathaniel Garrow's 7th Company against the traitorous forces, in particular when they were facing a Slaaneshi mutant known as a War Singer. The incident would occur right after Garrow had been taken down during battle. leading Eidolon to unleash his newfound ability using a devastating sonic attack to neutralize the Warsinger and secure victory. In retrospect, Eidolon's utilization of the technology marked a pioneering step towards what would later become known as Noise Marines, since this implement would be used by many of them. Following the cleansing on Laer, it seems the corruption had fully seeped through the 3rd Legion. Yet, Lord Commander Vesperian, a stalwart adherent to the Legion's ideals of honor and perfection, would go on to resist the pervasive arrogance and hubris that was increasingly plaguing his brethren. Concerned for the future of his legion, Vesperian sought counsel from the like-minded battle brothers such as 2nd Company Commander Solomon Demeter over many a month. And it must be noted that Vesperian was also present during the fateful meeting between Primarch Fulgrim and Eldrad Earlthwain. And while he obeyed Fulgrim's order to attack the Eldar delegation, viewing it as necessary to maintain their loyalty to the Imperium, he would hold some reservations. Weeks later, Fulgrim's fleet, including Vesperian's own cadre, were directed by the Council of Terra to rendezvous with the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet to investigate the reports of the War Master's injuries. Following the delegation to the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, Fulgrim would announce to his senior commanders his intentions to lead a small contingent to aid Ferrus Manus on Calanus IV in the Calanus system to ostensibly purge the world of orc infestation. Meanwhile, the War Master would take hold of the rest of the 63rd and go to Isstvan to supposedly quell an emerging rebellion. Accompanying them were the Death Guard and World Eaters, forming what would be otherwise seen as a formidable alliance of those loyal to the Emperor. While the legionaries cheered at the prospects of fighting alongside their brethren, Fulgrim's initial amusement soured as he contemplated how many of these warriors under Vesperian's leadership could be used to enhance the War Master's forces, and how many would have to be eliminated. This was due to Vesperian holding large reservations towards the more recent actions of his Primarch and Fabius Bile, as he had forbade all the troops under him from partaking in Fabius's chemical enhancements or augmentive surgeries. Fulgrim and Bile had gotten information that this had happened, condemning almost all of them to perish on Horus's trap on Isstvan III. Once more, it seems some remnant of Fulgrim would attempt to come to the surface, as he was grappling with a mixture of guilt and anticipation, which would lead him to a thought, rather belated but seemingly valid in his mind, that removing Vesperian earlier could have spared many lives. As the massacre on Isstvan III unfolded, Horus's forces and those loyal to him would be purged of weakness and turned into a lethal instrument aimed at the heart of the Imperium's so-called corruption. Despite his noble efforts and intention, Vesperian and many of his men would meet their demise following the 3rd Legion's operation and their placement under Horus's command. However, his resolve to do something, anything really, would be solidified after he had witnessed the abandonment of Solomon Demeter's 2nd Company by Captains Kherson and Vasaron, as Vesperian and his 2nd Company headed towards the Isstvan system to join the forces of the other legions in pacifying the supposed rebellions on Isstvan III. Vesperian seized a crucial opportunity, as he would go on to confront Fulgrim in his stateroom, bravely voicing his concerns about the Legion's moral decay and the deviation from Fulgrim's and the Legion's founding principles. It was a tragic revelation for Vesperian, who realized just too late that when he had gone to speak to his Primarch, his father had already been too deeply held in the clutches of chaos to be saved, and driven by the sinister whispers of the demon-possessed Laer blade, Fulgrim callously ended Vesperian's life, thrusting the anathema into his neck. This was one of Fulgrim's greatest betrayals, not of a brother, but of one who was genetically loyal to him to a fault, his son. Before the Horus Heresy openly initiated and Horus started his rebellion against the Emperor, a pivotal moment arose. To purge loyalist factions from the Astartes legions under Horus's command. This would occur via the use of Isstvan III's planetary governor, who had succumbed to the corruption of the chaos god Slaanesh, whose cultists had long operated clandestinely on the planet ever since its initial imperial conquest. He would be pushed into declaring independence, giving Horus carte blanche to conduct a large-scale military operation in order to reclaim the world, in particular its capital city. And even though the order came from the Council of Terra, it was almost entirely influenced by Horus's own treacherous ambitions. Although the legions under his direct control, the Sons of Horus, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, and the Emperor's Children, had already largely turned traitor and embraced chaos, it seemed a significant portion of each legion had remained loyal. These segments of still loyal Astartes were mainly Terran-born Space Marines, initially recruited and having served directly under the Emperor himself. Under the guise of restoring imperial order, Horus had created a strategy that would put those who would feel most enthused about serving with each other, once again, those loyalists born from Terra, together on the planet. After subjecting Isstvan III to a prolonged orbital bombardment, Horus would dispatch all the known loyalists to the planet's surface in order to secure its compliance, which realistically, such numbers for a singular, already crippled capital should have keyed off many of the great minds within the Legion, in particular those of the Third, who prided themselves on excelling in all aspects of warfare. Yet, at the moment of what appeared to be their penultimate triumph, the capture of the Coral City, the Loyalists found themselves betrayed. From orbit, Horus would unleash the devastating and vile Life-Eater virus bombs upon the Astartes in order to annihilate them. Amidst this betrayal, Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children aboard the strike cruiser Andronius uncovered the genocidal plot against the Loyalists. Working with Death Guard Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow aboard the Eisenstein, Tarvitz would go on to defy the pursuit and descend directly upon Isstvan III. There he courageously would go on to warn as many Loyalist Space Marines from all four legions that he could find. And through this act of sacrifice, he enabled many of them to seek shelter before the virus bombs struck, allowing them to survive and mount some amount of resistance to the traitors. However, the entirety of the civilian population of Isstvan found themselves unprotected from this onslaught, as the Life-Eater virus bombs were designed to dissolve all flesh upon contact. As they had been unleashed without discrimination, they would quickly claim the lives of 12 billion inhabitants in what would be a horrifying instance, leading the planet to be engulfed in a psychic wave of death, which momentarily disrupted all warp-based technology, including momentarily causing a large flicker and disruption of the powerful Astronomicon beacon across the warp. In the aftermath of this, the Primarch of the World Eaters Legion, Angron, recognizing that the virus bombs had ostensibly failed in wiping out the Loyalists in their totality, was enraged beyond measure. Seeing this as a failure, Angron abandoned all restraints and decided to completely ignore Horus, leading 50 companies of World Eater Traitor Marines in a frenzied assault upon the planet's surface. Driven purely by lust and by an unknown devotion to the blood god Khorne, the traitorous World Eaters descended in a savage orgy of violence, disregarding all conventional tactics and strategies, becoming merely Khorne berserkers. Horus, despite his initial frustrations at Angron's impulsiveness, which seemed to jeopardize his carefully laid out plans, seized the opportunity to turn this chaotic situation to his advantage. He would go on to swiftly reinforce Angron's berserk forces with additional troops from the Sons of Horus, the Death Guard, and the Emperor's Children, transforming what could have been a lopsided slaughter of the traitor World Eaters and a major setback for Horus's forces into a victory. As even with the warnings of Sol Tarvitz, the remains of the legions could not take that many fresh troops. Fortunately, a brave contingent of loyalists, led by Battle Captain Garrow aboard the damaged frigate Eisenstein, managed to escape the cataclysm of Isstvan III. Their harrowing flight of the Eisenstein aimed to reach Terra, where they intended to warn the Emperor of Horus's treachery. Meanwhile, on the embattled planet, loyalist resistance from Captain Tarvitz, Gavriel Loken, and Tariq Torgaradon valiantly resisted the traitorous forces, and despite the initial successes that delayed Horus's plans by 3 crucial months, the remains of the loyalists were forced to face truly insurmountable odds due to their lack of support, Titan firepower, ammunition, and having to face Primarchs. During the fierce conflict, another tragic betrayal would occur, this time within the Sons of Horus, where Captains Ezekiel Abaddon and Horus Aximund, once brothers in arms with Logan and Torgaradon in the Mournival, turned against them. Aximund ended Torgaradon's life in combat, while Abaddon's attempts on Loken's life would be thwarted by a collapsing building which allowed Loken to witness the devastating orbital bombardment that sealed the Loyalists' fates. Amidst this grim betrayal, and within the Emperor's Children's Legion, further treachery would unfold as Captain Lucius of the 13th Company, later to be known as Lucius the Eternal, turned against his former comrades, led by Tarvitz and Demeter. Driven by an insane jealousy and desire to prove himself to Lord Commander Eidolon and Fulgrim, Lucius slaughtered those once he had fought alongside, those he knew as brothers, earning himself a preeminent place amongst the traitors. As the Loyalists dwindled to a mere few hundred defenders, Horus begrudgingly would prolong the conflict, ordering their annihilation as the Coral City was their last bastion, would be reduced to dust by a final devastating orbital bombardment, marking the tragic end of the Isstvan III atrocity and the deaths of many of the remaining loyalist Emperor's children. Amidst the gathering storm of the Horus Heresy, a dark symphony echoed which would change the destiny of the Emperor's Children's Legion forevermore. At its heart was Barika Kinska, a celebrated composer from Terra, whose insatiable quest for new sensations drew her unwittingly into the clutches of Slaanesh. As a remembrancer aboard Fulgrim's flagship, the Pride of the Emperor, she was captivated by the corrupting allure of the Xenos world of Laer and its temple dedicated to the god of excess and pleasure. There, amidst the tainted echoes of the warp, she conceived the Maraviglia, a symphony intended to capture the sublime, malevolent essence she had encountered upon the world. Within the opulent theater known as the La Fience aboard the flagship, she unleashed her creation upon an audience that included not only Astartes and the Primarch himself, but many of the mortals serving within the vessel. Crafted with new instruments of her personal design, imbued with both sonic prowess and dark sorceries, her composition transcended mere music. Its cacophony acted as a conduit, bridging the realms of reality and the warp, allowing the sinister energies of Slaanesh to permeate through the gathering. The effects of this performance were both profound and disturbing, including disorientation, heightened sensations and awareness of said sensations in some cases, and lethal impulses amongst many of the audience. This composition marked the genesis of the first true Noise Marines, and the first of the first was Marius Viorsin, and so the Emperor's Children would gain one of their most signature military units, one that would persist to this day within almost every Emperor's Children's warband. Many warriors of the Emperor's Children would be corrupted by this musical symphony, never to be able to return to what they once were. And amidst the haunting echoes of her symphony, more transformations would occur aboard the Pride of the Emperor. As the symphony swelled with its dark intent, chaos mutations seized the audience. Both Astartes and mortal alike were plunged into a maelstrom of hedonistic indulgence and savage violence. It was a spectacle where the uncontrollable emotions of all humanity collided with their basis of instincts, creating a true orgy of sensation and murder. It was excess personified. In the throes of this chaotic crescendo, the very fabric of reality grew even thinner, allowing 5 lesser demons of Slaanesh, demonettes, to materialize, as they seized upon and possessed the bodies of Kinsia and her singer, allowing them to add their own perverse energies to the unfolding carnage, and forever marking them as chaos possessed. Amidst the figurative and literal chaos, some of the Emperor's Children's Astartes moved to take the instruments for their own, and even in their untrained hands, the arcane devices unleashed waves of destructive power upon the audience, becoming the first full band of Noise Marines. Eventually, on Isstvan V, these Noise Marines would be organized as the Cacophony under the command of First Captain Julius Kerson, and they would wield their infernal weaponry with deadly precision in order to slay as many loyalists as possible, being some of the first truly chaos-corrupted Astartes that any loyalist would ever match up against. Amidst the carnage of the dropsite massacre on Isstvan V, during the Horus Heresy, a rather climactic clash would unfold, one which would echo throughout the galaxy forevermore. As the loyalists, Salamanders, Raven Guard, and Iron Hands would descend upon Isstvan V, eager to confront Horus's traitor legions, the Emperor's children would join the fray with so much glee that it was palpable to the other legions. The battlefield became their theater of devastation as thousands of drop pods and stormbirds thundered down onto the planet's surface, disgorging warriors ready to spill blood in the name of their respective loyalties. Leading the charge for the loyalists was Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, who was accompanied by the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, each commanding their own legions with precision and ferocity. Vulcan's forces were set upon to aggress against the left flank of the traitors, while Ferrus Manus, supported by his trusted First Captain Gabriel Santor and the formidable remaining Morlock Terminators, would plunge headlong into the enemy's defenses, all the while Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard would strike from the right, their stealth and speed aimed at disrupting the traitors' formations. And to them it seemed that the odds were grimly stacked. 40,000 loyalists fighting against 30,000 traitor marines. And while this number seems rather big, it is often touted that you need a 3-to-1 advantage in order to eliminate any properly defended forces. However, aware of the loyalists' chosen drop site, Horus had orchestrated a devastating counterassault that would shatter the loyalists' plans. Traitor marines, driven by twisted loyalties and festering hatred, engaged their former comrades in a brutal dance of betrayal. The once pristine battlefield would devolve into a nightmarish Machiavellian play of death and destruction. Massive Titan war engines, embodiments of the machine god's wrath, would stride across the terrain, leaving trails of death and devastation in their wake. Amidst the chaos, the hooded adepts of the Dark Mechanicum would unleash arcane horrors of stolen and forbidden technology, further tipping the scales towards the traitors' favor. As unending rivers of blood covered much of the world, heroes and traitors alike would fall, their names etched into the grim gravestone that would be Isstvan V. The Dropsite Massacre was truly a brutal battle, which in large part set the pace for the remainder of the Horus Heresy. However, upon the expanse of the Urgral depression on Isstvan V, the fate of empires hung on the balance, as traitor and loyal Space Marine legions clashed in a climactic struggle that would define the rest of the conflict within the world. The scene itself was a colossal clash where freshly mustered traitor legions awaited the approaching and unknowing loyalists who, despite their relative success in securing the depression, had suffered great losses to all three of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard legions, finding himself facing formidable combat and with his elite veterans, including some of the most advanced Terminators and Dreadnoughts of the 10th Legion. Primarch Ferrus Manus would plunge headlong into battle, with a singular vision, directly engaging Fulgrim in combat. This was seemingly out of character, as he had completely abandoned his peers, Corax and Vulcan, disregarding their warnings and what was a strategic assault swiftly escalated into one of the largest and bloodiest conflicts of the Great Crusade, where over 60,000 Astartes warriors clashed directly against each other on the dusky plains of Isstvan V. All the while, Fulgrim watched with a grim smile as his brother Ferrus Manus finally surged forward into battle, right at the heart of the traitor's defenses. It seemed everything was going to plan. Backlit by the fiery chaos of battle, Ferrus cast a striking figure of vengeance as his silvery hands and his eyes reflected a flickering, intense brilliance. In that fleeting moment, Fulgrim anticipated Ferrus might pause to strategize with the Raven Guard and the Salamanders, which could potentially overwhelm him and turn the tide of battle in the Loyalists' favor. Unfortunately for humanity, Ferrus' relentless sense of honor and the deep betrayal by his favored brother brokered no delay, as around Fulgrim stood the last remains of the Phoenix Guard, poised to intercept the Iron Hand's brutal assault. Their golden halberds were lowered and ready to engage in combat, one that would, in almost all other circumstances, laid almost all of them and their Primarch low. As this occurred, Ferrus Manus led his Morlocks in a thunderous charge that shattered the remnants of the enemy's defenses, their black armor burnished with plates of stained blood and viscera from a myriad of traitor foes. Fulgrim's smile momentarily wavered as he beheld the depths of his brother's unending animosity, pondering how their fraternal bond had unraveled into this irreversible enmity that would lead one of them to die. As it seemed, he had hoped for some mere shred, a possibility of reconciliation, but even that too had faded, as only death would now settle their feud. As the Iron Hands advanced relentlessly, their massive Terminators, some of the most advanced in the entire galaxy, were in essence unstoppable, and lightning crackled from their clawed gauntlets. The Phoenix Guard's own practiced perfection allowed them to meet the charge with a thunderous battle cry, as amidst the chaos of halberds and lightning claws and the deafening sounds of concussive blasts, Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children, stood poised, observing the carnage. As he readied himself for the inevitable direct confrontation which was mere moments away between him and Ferrus Manus, and as the dropsite massacre would set the stage for the battle between Primarchs Fulgrim and Ferrus Manus, Ferrus would taunt Fulgrim for his betrayal and his arrogance in thinking that he and his brothers could succeed against the Emperor's might. Convinced of his brother's madness, Ferrus believed, erroneously, that the War Master's forces were on the brink of defeat, with the intermittent arrival of 4 more Loyalist legions who were poised to crush the rebellion. Fulgrim, now essentially another being altogether, was unable to contain his anticipation as he savored the moment of ultimate betrayal. Shaking his head, here he would reveal to Fulgrim the true nature of his predicament. Pointing to the northern edge of the Urgal depression, Fulgrim showed Ferrus that it was the Loyalists who had been trapped, that Fulgrim himself was mere bait for Ferrus Manus. As Ferrus saw a force larger than the initial assault wave assembled at the landing zone he, Corax, and Vulcan had created, all ready for battle. And as the battle raged on, Corax and Vulcan would attempt to lead their forces back to the drop site, struggling to drag their wounded and dead behind them, as they sought to regroup with the newly arrived brother Primarchs and the fresh legions of the second wave in order to share in the glory of defeating Horus. However, much to their surprise, despite voicing requests for medical aid and supplies, the lines of the Astartes atop the northern ridge remained eerily silent as the exhausted and battered Raven Guard and Salamanders approached within 100 meters of their supposed allies. A crucial moment occurred. Horus would unveil the full depths of the treachery. From within the black fortress that served as his lair upon the planet, a lone flare shot skyward, exploding in a hellish glow that illuminated the battlefield. The fire of betrayal would erupt as the barrels of thousands of guns of the freshly arrived second wave revealed their true loyalties. The traitorous legions turned their weapon upon their unsuspecting brothers, sealing the fate of the Loyalist forces on Isstvan. As Ferrus Manus looked on in stunned horror, horror, Fulgrim, now irrecognizable, laughed at the expression in his brother's face. The forces that were supposed to be his allies, his assurance of victory, had turned, unleashing a devastating barrage on the Salamanders and the Raven Guard. In the fury of the first few moments, both Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim recognized that hundreds were killed, and more would follow as volley after volley of bolter fire and missiles would tear through the formerly unsuspecting ranks. The terrifying carnage unfolded as the retreating forces of the War Master once again turned their weapons against the warriors who had believed themselves mere moments from being victorious. The World Eaters, the Sons of Horus, and the Death Guard fell upon the veteran companies of the Iron Hands, and despite their gallant resistance, the warriors of the 10th Legion were hopelessly outnumbered and faced inevitable annihilation in almost every front. This led Ferrus Manus to bare his teeth with the same volcanic fury of his homeworld. As he turned to Fulgrim, the two Primarchs would leap at each other in a titanic clash, Ferrus wielding the now reconstructed Fireblade, and Fulgrim holding Forgebreaker. These weapons, once forged in brotherhood, now clashed in vengeance, and met in a blazing plume of energy as they traded blows with their monstrously powerful weapons. Ferrus delivering fiery slashes with his formidable blade. Unfortunately for him, each blow was countered by Fulgrim's ebony-hafted hammer. In short order, their armor became dented and damaged, torn and blackened by the ferocity of their struggle. As the battle raged on, both Primarchs inflicted deep and devastating wounds upon each other. Ferrus, pushing himself to his feet, would stagger towards the wounded Fulgrim, crying out as he brought the flaming blade down towards his brother's neck. But it seemed that this too was a ploy, as Fulgrim drew the single-edged, demonically possessed and empowered sword, the Laer blade, and blocked the descending weapon. The undiluted power of chaos would stream from the blade, flooding Fulgrim's limbs with diabolical, previously unknown strength. As he felt his brother's surprise at the resistance, Fulgrim would manage to surge to his feet, and with a vicious strike, the silver blade dug deep into his brother's breastplate. This would lead to the Primarch of the Iron Hands to cry out, falling to his knees once again, as the weight of betrayal and the power of chaos bore down upon him. Ferrus Manus looked on in stunned horror as Fulgrim laughed at the expression on his brother's face. The forces of their supposed allies had turned, unleashing devastation upon Vulcan's and Corax's forces. In the first few moments, all the calculations that Ferrus Manus had done were thrown out the window. All the while, a terrifying carnage unfolded, and Ferrus Manus had been none the wiser and unable to stop this. As the two engaged in combat once more, Fulgrim's blade seemed to move with a life of its own as he swung it. Desperately, he tried to pull the blow, but his muscles were no longer under his control. The demonic source sliced through the genetically enhanced flesh and bone of one of the Emperor's sons. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, fell to the ground, decapitated by his brother's hands. Though Fulgrim had emerged victorious, he realized as he gazed down upon his brother's fallen, prostrate body that everything had been a lie. It was at this moment he had awoken from a long mental fog, as he was shocked by Ferrus's death, and it was now that he would see everything clearly for the first time since his expedition to Laer. The horror of what he had done, the betrayals that led to many Astartes slaying each other, and the death that he had laid low upon his brother, one of the few beings in existence who could truly understand him, fell upon him. Consumed by grief, Fulgrim succumbed to a moment of weakness as he foolishly heeded the demon's whispers, which promised release in oblivion, and in that instance, the greater demon of Slaanesh was freed from the sword and fully possessed Fulgrim's body, claiming it for its own, as Fulgrim's consciousness would be trapped within a psychic prison formed within his own mind, which would then be symbolically represented as a painting of the Primarch, which would be placed in a position of honor in La Fianza, the theater of the 3rd Legion's flagship, the pride of the Emperor. Following the traitor's victory at Isstvan V, Fulgrim would request a private audience with Horus, pleased with his brother's accomplishments, anticipating the presentation of a ghastly trophy, the severed head of Ferrus Manus as promised, and gloating over his significant triumph. At this, Horus wished to share this moment. However, the Primarch of the Emperor's children would reveal to him something unexpected, something which momentarily shook the Primarch. Fulgrim admitted that he lacked the fortitude to fulfill his oath to Horus, and had not killed Ferrus Manus himself. Instead, he had allowed another to do it for him. At that moment, the War Master realized that the figure before him was not truly his brother Fulgrim, but some sort of doppelganger. Enraged, Horus threatened the false Fulgrim, the being who had possessed his brother's body, warning it that he could crush him like a straw. The imposter, however, had no desire to engage in such fruitless combat. Horus glanced at Fulgrim's waist and relaxed momentarily upon seeing that this entity had come unarmed, indicating that violence was not its intent. The false Fulgrim declared his loyalty to Horus's cause, revealing his true identity as a creation of the Warp, a servant of the Dark Prince Slaanesh. The greater demon explained to the horrified War Master that it had claimed Fulgrim's mortal shell as his own, and found great pleasure in doing so. This was a revelation that left Horus utterly stunned, as he was confronted with the chilling reality of the corruption within his own ranks, and the nature of the powers he had allied himself to, and those who irrevocably owned his soul. His meeting with Fulgrim, or the thing that was in control of Fulgrim's body, Horus had his mind racing with conflicting emotions, as he would go on to further inquire upon the fate of his brother. To this, the demon, now in possession of the body, would assure him that Fulgrim was indeed safe, though he was trapped within his own form, as this greater demon controlled his every movement, while Fulgrim, conscious of his predicament, could do nothing but bear witness to the demon's activities. His cries of anguish would only serve as a perverse comfort for the malefic entity now residing within the body. Upon hearing this, Horus was deeply appalled, but chose to remain silent, calculating the implications of the disturbing turn of events. Despite his horror, the demon Fulgrim would pledge his allegiance to Horus's cause, along with granting its warp-based powers to the war effort, whose grandeur were in essence immutable. In this moment, Horus would recognize the strategic necessity of maintaining this vile abomination as an ally, since the Third Legion were indispensable for his future plans. However, internally, Horus had resolved that when the time came, he would find a way to destroy the demon and liberate Fulgrim from this unending torment, since, at least in his thoughts, no one deserved such a fate, not even in the treacherous landscape of their rebellion. Until then, Horus and the demon-possessed Fulgrim had agreed to keep the true nature of the demon's existence a closely guarded secret, as the demon had no desire to reveal himself, and Horus understood that such a revelation could cause insurmountable amounts of discord amongst the other Primarchs who had committed themselves to the traitor's cause. Thus, the pact was sealed with unspoken words, and Horus, now more than ever, was aware of the high-stakes game he had thrust himself into, along with the betrayal that defined their dark path. 4 solar days after the dropsite massacre on Isstvan V, Horus Lupercal would create a convention of the Primarchs who had renounced their loyalty to the Imperium aboard his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. There, they were acutely aware of the stakes of their impending campaign and the role of each Primarch and their legion within. The traitors' fleets were mobilizing and preparing for a great assault on the Imperium, the likes of which it had never known. This assembly was significant as it marked the first gathering of the full fraternity of traitor Primarchs, sans the actual Fulgrim. But this is something only Horus knew. 8 Primarchs were present, though only half would attend in person. These included Fulgrim, Perturabo, Angron, and Lorgar Aurelian. The 4 others, Conrad Kurz, Mortarion, Alfarius, and Magnus the Red, had appeared as holographic projections. Magnus's image in particular was notable for its silver radiance, projected by sorcerer's means from his sorcerer's planet, rather than through technological means, and it was there that he was still recovering from the recent burning of Prospero by Leman Russ's own space wolves, who were under the orders of Horus Lupercal to attack. As the council began, Lorgar Aurelian, now seated at the table physically, could not tear his gaze away from Fulgrim, as he suspected something. Horus was notably wary of his brother's behavior and inattentiveness, sensed the mounting tension. As the meeting had barely commenced when Lorgar, with deliberate slowness, reached for his ornate Crozius mace on his back. His eyes, flickering with cold resolve, remained fixed on Fulgrim. As the atmosphere would grow palpably colder, as a psychic force began to rim the atmosphere. And this was notable not just for those physically present, but it was attested to by those who were thousands of miles away. This gathering of traitors was intended to solidify their unity. However, it now teetered on the edge of violence and distrust, foreshadowing many of the dark events that would come to pass. The tension in the room reached a palpable climax as the word-bearer's Primarch, Lorgar, leveled an accusation against the being mimicking his brother. Without warning, Lorgar's Crozius mace crashed into the figure who was pretending to be the Emperor's Children's Primarch, Fulgrim, hurling him into the back of a wall, where he crumpled to the ground. Lorgar's fierce eyes scanned the assembled brothers. As he declared that the fallen figure was not Fulgrim, the other Primarchs, sensing the gravity of the claim, drew their weapons and advanced. Horus, the War Master, attempted to placate Lorgar, whose mere threat of confrontation had previously been enough to deter rash actions. However, the changes in Lorgar since Isstvan V were unequivocally evident. Even to Horus, clutching his mace, Lorgar warned them to stay back, as his crimson gauntlets shone in stark contrast to his icy determination. Horus, seeking to defuse the situation, tried once more to calm the enraged Lorgar. To Lorgar's surprise, the War Master's words revealed that he had already been aware that the being before them was not truly Fulgrim. Horus then informed them that he would personally handle the matter. Then he dismissed them from his chamber, with the exception of Lorgar. The word-bearer's Primarch could see the truth. This creature was a demon of chaos, puppeteering the hollow shell of their brother. Lorgar, confused and enraged, questioned how this had come to pass and why Horus had continued to protect such a dark secret. The War Master would go on to explain that he had not orchestrated Fulgrim's demise, and that he was merely contending and containing the aftermath. Horus's admission revealed a grim reality. The demon that now inhabited Fulgrim's body was a powerful warp entity, and that Horus deemed it necessary to keep the creature as an ally for the time being. However, he secretly resolved to destroy the demon and rescue Fulgrim, and it appears that Lorgar had similar thoughts. Thus, the stage was set for the new phase in the heresy, where loyalty and deception would be intertwined, and the true cost of rebellion now made itself evident, as it was far darker than that which they had previously imagined. After the meeting, Lorgar was notably deeply unsettled by the realization that another sentience now inhabited his brother's body. Horus, who had already been annoyed, questioned Lorgar, who had never been close to Fulgrim, why he seemed so concerned. Lorgar would go on to explain that this vile intrusion was a perversion of the natural order, a disharmony that contrasted starkly with his own blessed demon-possessed gene-sons, the Gal Vorbak. To Lorgar, the annihilation of a living soul to house a greedy unborn demon was an abomination. During Lorgar's pilgrimage to the Eye of Terror, years earlier, he had walked in the warp itself, standing at the intersection of the gods and mortals. He knew that this form of possession represented a weakness and corruption, a perversion of what the Chaos Gods desired for mankind. The ruinous powers sought to ally willing followers, not soulless husks, ridden by their demons. Using his formidable psychic abilities, Lorgar held the demon at bay. The War Master cautioned that might kill Fulgrim, but Lorgar, with conviction, retorted that the being before them was not their brother, but an it a creature he could destroy if he so wished. He threatened the demon, vowing to learn its true name and banish it permanently back into the warp. The demon-possessed Fulgrim, helpless against Lorgar's psychic might, could do nothing. When the War Master attempted to restrain Lorgar by placing his hand on his shoulder, Lorgar psychically commanded Horus to remove it. Unable to resist the command, the War Master obeyed, further highlighting the depths of Lorgar's newfound power and his determination to right the wrong that had been done against his brother. In this moment, the stark reality of the situation became even clearer to Horus. The Primarchs, once unified in their rebellion, now faced a near endless amount of internal strife and the corrupting influence of the very sources they sought to harness for their own power. The battle for the future of the galaxy was now not only against the Emperor, but against the insidious corruption within their own ranks. As he withdrew his hand from Lorgar's shoulder, his fingers trembled, and the War Master's steely eyes betrayed the palpable tension within the room, as Lorgar stormed away from the council chambers in a fit of rather uncharacteristic rage. Horus would remark on the visible change in his brother since his encounter with Corax on Isstvan V, to which Lorgar tensely acknowledged that indeed everything had changed that fateful night as he departed towards his ship, consumed with contemplation on what he perceived as a profound corruption of fate. Unbeknownst to the rank and file of the Third Legion, their Primarch struggled fruitlessly against the chains of his own mind and body. Among them, only Captain Lucius of the 13th Company sensed that something was amiss within Fulgrim, though he chose to keep his suspicions to himself. The demon Fulgrim, sensing the latent warp-touched potential in Lucius, presented him with the silver demon blade, which once bound the essence of the Laer demon. Now wielding the more potent Kinnerbrak anatheme bestowed upon him by Horus, the demon Fulgrim channeled its residual power, foreseeing Lucius's pivotal role in the tumultuous years to come ahead. After the conclave aboard Horus's flagship, the demon Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children's Legion received orders from the War Master to support the coming civil war within the Mechanicum on Mars. However, driven by his increasingly erratic nature, the demon Fulgrim defied these orders. Instead, he commanded his legion to launch a brazen assault on Prismicta 5, a crucial Mechanicum crystal mining world. In the turbulent aftermath of Fulgrim's descent into capriciousness, Lord Commander Eidolon dared question his Primarch's erratic commands. In particular, his dismissal of the War Master's orders, unaware of the peril it would bring. His attempts to reason with Fulgrim only further stoked the Primarch's paranoia, leading to a fatal misunderstanding, and in a swift but brutal motion, Fulgrim drew the anatheme and struck Eidolon down. The once favored commander was now seen as a potential betrayer, and with Eidolon's lifeless head in his hand, Fulgrim would enact a rather macabre ritual, depicting him as truly the monster possessed, dipping the slain commander's blood into casks of victory wine, which would be shared amongst the Legion's senior officers. Among them was Lucius, who had been rising through prominence as he silently observed the grim spectacle. Troubled by his lord's unraveling sanity and haunted by the unsettling dreams involving the painting of Fulgrim in La Ciencia, which was now constantly guarded by a cadre of Phoenix Guard, and due to this, Lucius had resolved to delve deeper into the mystery which was unfolding within the Legion. Amidst the mounting concerns over Fulgrim's increasingly erratic behavior, Lucius would note that Fulgrim's growing detachment from the Legion's tradition, along with his waning martial prowess. Once, his techniques and skill were unrivaled. Now, he could be surpassed on multiple occasions by Lucius himself. These observations deepened Lucius's suspicions, as he now knew something was amiss. The confirmation would only come during the assault on the Mechanicum mining world, where Lucius witnessed Fulgrim wielding formidable psychic powers against Mechanicum Warhound-class titans, a feat that was beyond any ordinary Astartes. Compounding his unease were the recurring dreams compelling Lucius to defy the orders and investigate La Fience aboard the Pride of the Emperor, where Slaanesh's influence over the Emperor's children had taken root. Eventually, his Primarch's uncharacteristic use of psychic powers led him to deciding to explore the desolate chambers. There, Lucius stumbled upon a grand portrait over the shattered stage. Even in ruin, its splendor captivated him. A regal Fulgrim adorned in resplendent purple and golden armor, framed by the flaming wings of a phoenix, a symbol of the Legion's pride. This painting radiated an aura of unnatural majesty, capturing Fulgrim in his prime, bathed in a fiery glow of a mythic symbol. The portrait of Fulgrim was meticulously crafted and exuded a truly unparalleled depiction of grandeur and charisma, which his father was known for, a testament to the artistic mastery that had resonated with awe-inspiring beauty. Yet within those painted eyes, Lucius discerned a haunting anguish that transcended mortal artistry. The agony etched in the portrait seemed almost alive, haunting Lucius with a chilling realization. His Primarch's essence had been ensnared within the painting, while an impostor was masquerading as the Legion's leader. Driven by an unwavering dedication to liberate Fulgrim, Lucius clandestinely rallied the Brotherhood of the Phoenix, a secretive warrior lodge restricted only to the highest-ranking officers within the Legion. Aware of the perilous implications, Lucius navigated the treacherous waters of the Legion's politics, where senior officers, corrupted by their desires and disdain for him, posed a formidable obstacle. With persuasive eloquence, which he had inherited from Fulgrim, Lucius convinced his brethren that there was an impostor deceiving them all, challenging their egos and rallying them to seize their Primarch. In a daring ambush orchestrated by the Brotherhood, Fulgrim, or the thing that was Fulgrim, was subdued after a fierce struggle that left casualties on both sides. And despite the risks along with the internal strife, Lucius's gambit succeeded in capturing their Primarch, marking a pivotal moment in the Emperor's children's descent into darkness. The Primarch was swiftly transported to the Apothecarian after being caught, under the oversight of Chief Apothecary Fabius, where he was securely fastened to an examination table capable of restraining even a Primarch, where Fabius, Lucius, Julius Cerson, and Marus Veriosin had determined to be the location where they would expel the demonic entity from within Fulgrim's corporeal form, and they proceeded to engage in a prolonged ritual known as exoration. Enduring the torturous ordeal without resistance, Fulgrim engaged his captors in discussions about his perceptions of reality, escalating the influence of chaos across the galaxy and the envisioned future for his legion. In the midst of this agonizing process, Lucius suddenly comprehended their grave error. They had been deceived by their Primarch. Acknowledging their folly, Lucius immediately humbled himself before Fulgrim, realizing that the entity that they sought to expel was not a mere possession, but the true essence of their lord. Freed from his bounds, Fulgrim forgave his loyal sons, understanding their intentions and the lessons learned from their misguided efforts. With a profound revelation, Fulgrim disclosed to Lucius the intricate truth behind his elaborate deception. He admitted to being host to a demonic entity for an extended period of time, during which his disembodied spirit had been ensnared within the portrait. But rather than succumbing to despair, Fulgrim had utilized his confinement to master the arcane arts of the warp, and to deepen his understanding of demonkind's inscrutable ways. He eventually mastered these arcane insights sufficiently enough to expel the demon from his mortal form. Executing a daring maneuver, he swapped his consciousness with the malevolent entity, imprisoning it eternally within the portrait. It became evident that the demon had been communicating with Lucius through haunting dreams, in an attempt to engineer its release from captivity. To further educate his trusted champion in the arcane ways of chaos, Fulgrim deliberately feigned incompetence in swordsmanship to goad Lucius into confrontation. Expanding his revelations, Fulgrim clarified that his erratic behavior and solitary pursuits were not mere whims, but part of his transformative journey towards achieving the ultimate perfection under Slaanesh's guidance. He articulated his aspirations to explore the boundaries of reality through sensual experience, not for power alone, but for the profound journey itself, a journey that he invited his sons to join. Fulgrim disclosed that his directive to assault the mining world was driven by his desire to claim the Mechanicum's crystals in order to construct a magnificent city of mirrors, dedicated to the pursuit of sensual pleasure and self-enlightenment through sensory exploration. However, the next crucial step for the Emperor's children and their path towards enlightenment through chaos would involve a rendezvous with Primarch Perturabo and his Iron Warriors Legion. Amidst the ongoing tumult of Horus's rebellion, the Iron Warriors seized the moment to assert their dominance over their long-standing rivals, the Imperial Fists, on the newly compliant world of Hydra Cordatus. Victorious, Perturabo received word that Fulgrim and his Emperor's children sought a meeting to discuss matters of significant import. Though Fulgrim remained cryptic about the purpose of his visit, he assured his brother of its wondrous nature. Perturabo, known for his pragmatic approach, noted that Fulgrim's panache for drama had only intensified since the Third Legion's pledging of allegiance to Horus. While not close friends, their shared pursuit for perfection once forged a bond between the two Primarchs. Despite their contrasting methods, Fulgrim's pursuit through constant refinement and Perturabo's pursuit through disciplined planning mirrored each other. However, Perturabo suspected Fulgrim's visit was linked to the impending campaign against Mars. Securing the Martian dominion was crucial before advancing towards Terra, and Fulgrim likely sought the Iron Warriors' aid in breaching the Mechanicum's formidable forge cities. Prepared for any eventuality, Perturabo readied his legion to devise a strategy to achieve this pivotal objective, that is, until further orders arrived, and Perturabo entertained his brother's visit with cautious curiosity. Amidst the preparations for the impending campaigns, news arrived that the Emperor's children had descended upon Hydra Cordatus unannounced. Over 300 drop craft touched down beyond the mouth of the valley where the Iron Warriors had established their encampment. The Iron Warriors swiftly organized to greet their guests, forming a vanguard to welcome the Third Legion. Tens of thousands of Imperial Army troops stood in rigid ranks alongside 200 grand battalions of Iron Warriors, 50,000 warriors clad in armor-dust burnished warplate. It was a spectacle of martial might and a magnificence unseen since the horrors of Isstvan V. Yet Fulgrim and the Emperor's children emerged from the dropsites into the valley. Perturabo and his senior officers were struck not by admiration but by bewilderment. The once honorable warriors of the Third Legion had transformed into a garish parade of noise, color, and spectacle. Something profound had seemed to have changed within the Emperor's children, evident in the disfigurements and the degradation of their warriors, which were now proudly shown off as adornments. Perturabo pondered the purpose behind such ostentatiousness, unable to fathom the motives driving these alarming transformations. Fulgrim's eventual clandestine meeting with Perturabo unfolded within the secure confines of the Lord of Iron's command bunker, where he was presented with an irresistible proposition, a promise to fulfill Perturabo's deepest desires without disappointment or failure, offering an alliance that could tip the scales of the War Master's rebellion. Despite Perturabo's suspicions, he entertained the possibility that their shared goal might foster a mutual understanding. The revelation came swiftly, though, that they would embark on a perilous journey to the heart of the notorious warp storm, which constantly haunted Perturabo's recurring nightmares. Within the tempestuous realm supposedly lay a Xenos artifact, the Angel Exterminatus, a weapon so potent that even the stars, or the star gods, depending on who you ask, conspired to imprison it. Unbeknownst to the traitors, their every move was shadowed by a resolute band of loyalist Astartes, survivors from the Dropsite Massacre. These warriors were drawn from the ranks of the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and a lone Raven Guard, who had all escaped aboard a strike cruiser known as a Sisyphum. Their mission was simple: to thwart the traitors at any cost, even their own lives, and driven by a relentless pursuit for justice and vengeance, they would stand no failure. Following their harrowing escape from the Isstvan system, the Sisyphum navigated the perilous path through traitor-held territory, evading orbital blockades and enemy firestorms to reach relative safety, and in the ensuing months, the Sisyphum adopted a strategy of calculated aggression, as they became a relentless predator amidst the shadows of Segmentum Obscurus. Their targets were traitor forces attempting to exploit flanking routes, including scouting ships, mapping vessels, and heavily laden supply convoys ferrying troops, weapons, and vital supplies to the War Master's front lines. Engaging in hit-and-run operations, the Sisyphum struck swiftly and disappeared into the void just as fast, inflicting significant disruptions and setbacks upon their adversaries. Their actions were not merely acts of retaliation but strategic maneuvers aimed at bolstering the resilience of the scattered loyalist forces across the galaxy, forming an unconventional but effective resistance against what were overwhelming odds. Eventually, at Carvor Santa, Iron Hand Sabak Wayland, and a lone survivor of the Raven Guard, achieved a pivotal breakthrough by capturing an unilingual cipher host, a hybrid creature of the Dark Mechanicum known as a Cryptus. These abominations had previously rendered the traitors' coded communications impenetrable, but now with the Cryptus in their possession, the Loyalist commanders gained access to critical intelligence embedded within the enemy's transmissions. Armed with their newfound knowledge, the Sisyphum responded swiftly to intercepted communications indicating the gathering of the traitor Primarchs at Hydra Cardatus. Learning of Fulgrim's ambitious plans to venture into the Eye of Terror in order to search for the legendary Angel Exterminatus, they would swiftly steer their vessel, sneakily following the traitors into the perilous warp rift, all the while being aided by a rather mysterious Eldar guide who was determined to thwart the traitors' quest for the mysterious Xenos weapon. Joining the fleet of Iron Warriors and Emperor's Children's ships, the joint fleet of Iron Warriors and Emperor's Children's ships set their course for Lydris, a legendary crone world once revered by the Eldari. Said world was nestled within the Eye of Terror, as Lydris had defied chaos and the destruction surrounding it. Apparently, it just remained anchored due to the gravitational pull of a supermassive black hole, a celestial anomaly which was surrounded by an internal warp storm. This served as a gateway to the realms, a place where the laws of physics bend to the will of the warp, consuming all that dared approach its event horizon. This world stood as a dark testament to the climactic birth of Slaanesh, whose emergence had torn apart the once mighty Eldari, almost as if it were a jewel placed upon the galaxy by the god of excess, transforming their crone world into a haunted remnant of a lost civilization amidst the swirling chaos of the Eye of Terror, a forbidden realm of ancient power and perilous secrets, drawing both loyalist and traitor alike into its gravitational embrace. The culmination of the journey brought the Primarchs and their legions to the threshold. Once they landed on the planet, Fulgrim and Perturabo had their legions descend upon it in wave after wave, which in hindsight was rather fortunate, since even though the planet was dead, its guardians were also dead, but not in the same way, as eventually they would reach the sepulchre of Isha's doom, and within said sepulchre, the crystallized form of countless Eldari warriors would awake to combat those who they sensed were linked to their eternal enemy, Slaanesh. During this, the Primarchs and their sons started to battle against the Eldari's ghost warriors. However, Fulgrim seized an opportunity amidst the fray to slip out unnoticed. Understanding his brother's intent, Perturabo ventured into the pulsating green glow that radiated from the heart of the chamber. There, amidst the swirling energies, he sensed not mere elemental forces, but the distilled essence of countless souls, a testament to the grim legacy that awaited those who dared enter the sepulchre of Isha's doom. Perturabo would then descend the endless spiral staircase towards the distant point that refused to grow brighter no matter how deep he went. Their journey seemed infinite until it suddenly wasn't, culminating in a slender bridge where Fulgrim awaited him. The bridge spanned out into a colossal spherical chamber of mind-bending proportions. Bridge's footings were anchored at the equator of the planet's own core. As it seemed, each would also reach towards the central orbit of a radiant jade-like light that blazed like a miniature sun. Revealed now was a hollow world. Confronting his brother, Perturabo realized that there was never an angel exterminatus. Fulgrim confirmed this, asserting that instead he himself would become the angel exterminatus. Perturabo retorted with a mix of disbelief and scorn, noting his brother's propensity for grandiosity. Undeterred by skepticism, Fulgrim uttered a single word that struck the Lord of Iron like a blade, forcing him to kneel. Fulgrim had betrayed him. The gift that he had given him secretly before they headed towards the Eye of Terror was a harvester, an item of chaos designed to slowly sap Perturabo's strength and feed it to Fulgrim so he may ascend to godhood. With Perturabo being his unwitting sacrifice, Fulgrim believed that he could achieve apotheosis. With a forceful gesture, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children flung Perturabo aside, causing him to tumble in a languid arc, until he crashed with a resounding crunch of metal near the edge of the shaft. Every Astartes in the chamber turned their attention towards the event. Fulgrim was no longer the same being who descended into the core of the world, as he now hovered above the shaft where the green torrent of energy had now dwindled into a fading glow. Fulgrim's armor would shimmer with ethereal vitality, seeming to contain the light of countless suns, striving to burst forth all at once. His eyes, once vibrant with life, now appeared as twin black voids, offering glimpses into the realms of experience and sensation. Just as Fulgrim approached the culmination of his apotheosis, Perturabo summoned the last of his remaining strength and rose to his feet, clutching the harvester firmly in his hand. As he advanced towards Fulgrim, his gaze searching for any flicker of remorse or regret hidden behind his brother's eyes. A sign, perhaps, of redemption. He found none, and Perturabo's heart sank with the realization that Fulgrim was truly lost. Confronting Fulgrim, Perturabo denounced his brother's quest for godhood, asserting that humanity had long since surpassed the need for such aspirations. Disgusted by Fulgrim's ambition, Perturabo hurled the Harvester Stone into the depths of the shaft, symbolically rejecting his brother. Suddenly, the chamber erupted in a barrage of bolter fired, as the Iron Tenth, remnants of the Iron Hands, swiftly engaged the Emperor's Children and Iron Warriors in battle, turning the sepulchre into a battleground where loyalty and treachery clashed amidst ancient conflicts. The battlefield would then tighten its grip upon the Primarchs at its center. Perturabo kneeling with exertion and Fulgrim hovering just above him as if tethered to his brother by unseen bounds. However, amidst this tumult, a loyalist Astartes, the Raven Guard known as Saraukin, seized upon the falling harvester, intuitively sensing the danger it would pose if it were back in Fulgrim's hands. Saraukin would then take aim with a bolter and fire upon the stone, shattering it into shards, releasing the energy and revitalizing Perturabo. Fulgrim too felt the reverberating energy caused by the stone's destruction, for it held not just the stolen strength, but a fusion of their essences, a potent force capable of fueling a cataclysm beyond mortal comprehension. Fulgrim's gilded armor quickly dissolved into golden flakes, revealing a grotesquely swollen form, bathed in a furnace-like heat. The ethereal flames that covered him grew an iridescent pink and flickered a sickly purple hungrily around him, awaiting for even the faintest falter in his concentration. With a determined effort, Perturabo rose to his feet, lifting Forgebreaker into his shoulder. Fulgrim, sensing this impending doom, grinned knowingly that his brother would strike with all his might. Aware of the inevitability of this confrontation, without hesitation, Fulgrim accepted the blow from Perturabo's swing, which cleaved his body open in a rain of gore and viscera. Thus would end the tragic saga of betrayal and divine delusion amidst the clashes of echoing traitors and loyalists upon a dead world. That would be the end if Fulgrim had not planned for this. His body had ruptured beneath the impact of the Warhammer, and then there was a sudden, resultant cry, which echoed like a primordial birth scream. All the while, a surge of purple energy exploded outwards from the Phoenician's shattered form, bathing the chamber in a blinding light all too intense to directly behold, yet too mesmerizing to ignore. Like a birth of a new sun, the radiant brilliance became the focal point of everybody in the room. The aftermath of Fulgrim's transformation into the Daemon Primarch he would be forevermore was a scene of cosmic significance. As Perturabo stood amidst the wreckage of his brother's mortal form, he beheld a surreal metamorphosis. Fulgrim's body elongated and morphed, his legs merging into a serpentine tail, armored with scales and chitinous plates, a form reminiscent of beings of ancient myths and nightmarish visions. This new incarnation of his brother was not merely physical, but spiritual, an ethereal avatar fueled by the warp, embodying the desires and the essences of its creators. Fulgrim's countenance was now a blend of agonizing torment and ecstatic bliss, which bore witness to the transformation, as horns sprouted from his brow, crowning him as a demon prince of Slaanesh, the youngest of the gods of chaos. With a mysterious message, Fulgrim would depart into the Empyrean, leaving behind a swirling vortex of arcane energy as he whisked away his Chaos Space Marine retinue. The sudden absence of the energy that sustained the planet caused it to begin to fall into the supermassive black hole at the heart of the Eye of Terror. As the planet trembled in the brink of annihilation, the Iron Hands, who had stayed and currently had a clear shot at the weakened Primarch Perturabo, decided to retreat back to their vessel. Shortly after this, Perturabo marshaled his forces and retreated from the crumbling citadel, boarding the safety of his flagship, the Iron Blood. From this vantage point, the Primarch witnessed the death of those still on the planet, as the Crone world succumbed to the relentless gravitational pull of the black hole near the heart of the Eye of Terror. As his flagship, the Iron Blood, strained against the gravitational forces threatening to ensnare it, smaller vessels of the Iron Warrior's fleet had already succumbed. However, much to his commander's disbelief, Perturabo's mind came to a single conclusion. Unlike them, he was unshaken by the conclusion. He knew their path lay ahead, at the heart of the black hole, not fleeing from it. With grim resolve, the Iron Warriors plunged deeper into the Eye of Terror's swirling abyss, their fate entwined with the tides of chaos and destiny. Eventually, after the apotheosis of the Emperor's Children's Primarch, the Legion itself would join in on the siege of Terra. However, unlike many of the other forces who came upon the planet, the Emperor's children had been metamorphosed into grotesque caricatures of their former glory, and rather than join in on the destruction of the palace and the besieging of the Emperor's throne, the Emperor's children took a path more depraved and sinister than any other. With a frenzy of blood and twisted ecstasy, they descended upon the innocent populace of Terra, unleashing a deluge of unspeakable horrors, driven by a maddening hunger for hedonistic pleasures inspired by their new patron god, Slaanesh. The traitor marines inflicted upon the populace a carnival of agony and debauchery heretofore unseen before or since. Billions of Terrans became unwitting pawns in the Emperor's children's ceaseless quest for greater sensations, be it as experimental subjects for horrific stimulants, vessels for demonic incursions from the warp, or merely victims of wanton slaughter. Their lives were snuffed out to momentarily appease the deranged appetites of their tormentors. As the streets of Terra ran red with the blood of innocents, the echoing screams of those subjected to the unimaginable tortures in the name of the Emperor's children would feed she who thirsts endlessly. Amidst this chaos, the now ascended Fulgrim would confront Rogel Dorn and eventually leave with his legion out of his own volition, abandoning the siege of Terra and the war altogether. In the tumultuous aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the Emperor's children, once exemplars of martial prowess and artistic refinement, descended into a frenzy of unrestrained debauchery and violence. Following their retreat into the Eye of Terror, they embarked on a campaign of terror and plunder across imperial worlds, leaving devastation and destruction in their wake. Their insatiable thirst for excess led them to capture not only imperial citizens, but also slaves from other traitor legions, which incited conflicts within the realms of the Eye of Terror. Amidst these dark times, their Primarch, Fulgrim, vanished, reportedly withdrawing to a planet of indulgence bestowed upon him by Slaanesh, the chaos god whom they had pledged their allegiance to. Left leaderless, the remaining Emperor's children congregated at the Canticle City, a formidable fortress on the demon world of Harmony, under the command of Fabius Bile, the former chief apothecary of the Emperor's children. Bile, now known for his dark experiments and his twisted ambitions, took drastic actions to maintain control. He orchestrated the destruction of the Sons of Horus fortress at Malum and embarked on a daring scheme to clone the fallen Primarch Horus, which culminated in a catastrophic confrontation known as the Battle of Harmony. This clash, led by Ezekiel Abaddon, culminated in a clash between a purported clone of the Primarch himself, Horus. In the annihilation of Horus's cloned body, he dealt a severe blow to Bile's authority, ensuring chaos within the Emperor's children's ranks, as they would descend into internal conflict. Scarcity of resources and a broken chain of leadership led them to prey upon each other. The once proud legion was fractured into a myriad of warbands, each vying for dominance amidst the turmoil of what would become known as the Legion Wars. Despite this internal fracture, the Emperor's children remained formidable adversaries, continuing their relentless raids on imperial territories, their thirst for conquest and pleasure undiminished by the internal strife. In the records of post-heresy history, the Emperor's children would stand testament to the corrupting influences of chaos, as their descent from noble warriors to hedonists of unparalleled depravity would become a cautionary tale for many a legionary. Out of this tumult, a certain warband would coalesce into what was known as the Phoenix Conclave, which was an attempt to unify the fractured Emperor's children under the banner of the once again revived Lord Commander Primus Eidolon. Their goal was simple: to reclaim their former glory and the unity of their legion. Despite these efforts, the Emperor's children would remain fractured and rather volatile, and in the aftermath of the Eye of Terror's slave wars, they would dissolve into individual warbands once more, devoid of any cohesion or discipline. The title of Thordar would emerge amongst the leaders of these warbands as a remnant of the fragmented hierarchy which used to exist. Today, the Emperor's children are synonymous with hedonism in excess, uncontrolled and barely guided by anything other than their own pursuits for sensation and pleasure, as they have cast aside their old traditions only to be replaced by the grotesque and lavish adornments of their armor, shimmering skulls, gilded chains, and sensuous designs that reflect their corrupted souls. Blessed by Slaanesh, their armor not only protects them, but enhances their experience of pain and pleasure, turning every battle into a twisted ecstasy where pain is pleasure and death is an art. Amidst this carnage, some amongst the Emperor's children have honed their blades to taste the blood of their enemies. Their depravity knows no bounds as they continue to descend into further and further decadence. Each time they become more and more numb to the sensations. A multitude of Emperor's children Space Marines would undergo radical transformations to what is known as a Noise Marine, aberrant warriors obsessed with the cacophony of battle and a symphony of destruction that they can never truly experience in its fullest, as they now only embody the excesses of Slaanesh. A Noise Marine has their senses mutated to extremes beyond all comprehension, but it will never be enough. Their hearing, for instance, has been enhanced to an astonishing degree, capable of discerning minute vibrations and changes in pitch and volume that elude even the most advanced sensory technologies in existence. Hypersensitive auditory perception, which not only sharpens their awareness, but also triggers intense emotional responses, where mundane sensations pale in comparison to the ecstasy derived from discordant noises, leaving them addicted to sound. The crescendo of battle and shrieks of agony, along with the explosive thunder of weapons, are the only sources of solace they have left. Named for their affinity for sonic weaponry, the now rather commonplace Noise Marines wield their instruments as weapons. Tools such as the Blastmaster, a rifle that unleashes devastating frequencies capable of rendering flesh from bone and overwhelming the senses of even the hardiest of warrior. The Doom Siren, which is integrated into their very bodies, amplifies their screams into sonic blasts, which can repel even the strongest of adversaries. Additionally, they possess a chilling ability known as a warp scream, a gift from their god, a psychic shriek that disrupts and disorients those unfortunate enough to be within its range. Much later, in a bold stroke that reverberated across the Eye of Terror, as the galaxy navigates the treacherous waters of the 41st millennium, the scarcity of Emperor's Children warbands offers a fleeting reprieve from the horrors they embody, though facing them in battle remains a harrowing fate, one only surpassed by the relentless cruelty of the Drukhari, especially since the destruction of Cadia has allowed Chaos Space Marines a new foothold into the material world. However, the enigma surrounding the Primarch Fulgrim persists as one of the greatest mysteries of the chaos-tinted cosmos. According to arcane lore, it is believed that the Dark Prince Slaanesh bestowed him with the ultimate gift upon his apotheosis. His new countenance seems to match that of a being that has been rumored to be seen in some of the darkest corners of the galaxy, said corners which are no longer accessible by the Emperor's light. The Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition has embarked on multiple quests to search for this being, be he in the elusive realm gifted to him by Slaanesh or in the material world. Historical records recount Fulgrim's last known appearance during the Battle of Thessalia, where he engaged in a fateful duel with the Primarch Reboot Guilliman of the Ultramarines, and in a display of cunning and treachery, Fulgrim had grievously wounded him with the toxic anathime blade, which nearly costed the Primarch his life. However, it seems that this stroke was actually one of good fortune, as when the galaxy needed him most, the Primarch Guilliman was able to take control of the Imperium's fractured domains. It is only concretely known that Fulgrim retreated into the warp, where he has remained obscured from mortal sight. That is until the era of the Great Rift, where the rumors once again popped up, where he had allegedly been leading forces of the Emperor's Children and other Slaaneshi adherents against the resurgent Imperium. Whether Fulgrim has truly emerged from the warp to resume his campaign against the Imperial remnants in the darkened half of the Imperium, known as Imperium Nihilus, is a matter of speculation and dreaded anticipation amongst scholars and strategists alike, as Imperial scholars delving into the annals of history fraught with heresy and betrayal. The enigma of Fulgrim stands as a testament to the enduring shadow that was cast by the traitor legions, whether he still lurks within the darkest recesses of the warp or has returned to sow chaos anew amongst the stars. The specter of Fulgrim serves as a stark reminder of the ever-present threat posed by one who once pledged loyalty to the Emperor. His tale, now intertwined with the warp-spawned horrors of Slaanesh, continues to captivate and terrify as a cautionary tale for those who seek to understand the depths of forbidden knowledge and the price of hubris in the Imperium's tumultuous history.